Let's get the old hand down so as we can begin some sort of communicative intent. Indeed, some great points. I was fascinated listening to Bob because I know he's got his finger on the pulse, indeed, with what I call the elements of, indeed, instrumental positive change. EVs have, of course, changed the landscape for all the right reasons across our planet. I am a champion of them, yes. Why wouldn't I be? Indeed, when a vehicle is making you money instead of taking it away from you, it has to be to the greater good. My observations, indeed, brief, because there are other points that I want to make, are that we have collectively, I think, a situation. Indeed, I've got a situation where we're just turning a knob off the cooker there, but I will get back to the point in hand. The situation is that we have so many people across our planet that are so poverty stricken that they couldn't imagine owning a car of any capacity, be it the most prehistoric fossil fueled machine or indeed an EV one. And that's something that I feel I needed to bring into the conversation because I feel it's very relevant and it still continues to be. And I think it always will be for so many reasons, ultimately, that are wrong with everything within the construct of our societies, if I can put it like that. We have in my own UK homeland, Oliver, I know will know only too well, the imbalances in London alone between the haves and the have-nots are absolutely monumental and massive. And they continue to be across the geographical compass of my own United Kingdom, from the tip of Land's End to John O'Groats, and indeed everywhere else in between. The North continues to be, in the UK, a poverty hotspot. It's a poverty beacon of intent. Tyneside, Humberside, Liverpool regions, indeed, all those geographical regions across the northern sphere, if you will, continue to be an intent of such great deprived poverty. We have people that cannot even afford their rent, that are indeed not what you would call on the social scale of having an available content, of being able to live their lives with any comfort whatsoever. And to be able to afford even the smallest EV is a pipe dream. And it will continue to be a pipe dream for these, what I call disadvantaged people that are and have and continue to be fallen to the net collectively of our societies. I'm speaking for a second about my homeland, the UK, but this equally applies to every single geographical country on earth where the EVs are in abundance to be able to be bought, leased, indeed purchased, whatever financial agreement you want to bring into the topic or situation. But the biggest problem is that people are on such a poverty curve. When I talk about millions and indeed billions of people, so poverty stricken and such in such dire need to even be able to subsist and put food in their mouths of themselves and their families, and indeed to be able to have a roof over their head. Don't get me started on the luxuries of being able to have a roof over your head across the geographical African nation alone. But my point, of course, being is that we have a massive, massive imbalance of not being able to let every single person on earth have an EV. I'm afraid this is part and parcel of the absolutely crystal clear facts of the situation. I don't want them to ever be forgotten because I know how relevant they are, because I know that people's lives are entwined. Okay, we have many people across this planet that are doing very well financially. They have their pension schemes, they have their financial schemes, they have their saving schemes, they have every scheme under the sun to be that curtain for a blanket, if you will, to be able to keep away from the door the depths of depravity and poverty, which continues to rock the very foundations and souls of so many people. I would love it if every single person on this planet had absolutely open capability to an EV. But I know that Pup knows, like I do, that societies are simply not geared or balanced to such an extent. And one of the greatest ills geographically across our entire Earth is that until we have, when we talk about EVs, the ability for every single person to be balanced enough financially, which is going to, what I would call, be no mean feat indeed, of being able to have what I call a complete and utter social revitalization and social ability across the board. Now, we know, talking about my own homeland of the United Kingdom, our own, what I call, failed efforts of consecutive governments, of course, Oliver being in the same country knows this only too well. But we have so many people across the board in the United Kingdom that are so poor and have absolutely no hope ever, not only of not ever owning a gasoline powered car, but of owning an EV in its entirety. It's those people that I'm thinking about as I'm saying these words to you in the room and indeed out of the room. I think we need, and I know we continue to do, redress these massive, 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 gaping social ills which have been allowed to ferment and brew, like indeed a heady cocktail that has been allowed to ferment over the course of time. I think we need to be able to mend these gaping wounds that we have as societies allowed through consecutive failures of every single political and social system within every single economic thread of our existences within our local and our national communities. If we want to redress the balance finally of being able to have more people on this earth than ever before be able to drive around in EVs, we need to redress the balance of failed economic systems, hands down, not just within my own UK society, but across the board. Because that dream of having every single person drive an EV is very, very, I'm sad to have to say it, and I don't want to have to, so far off the mark consecutively, geographically at the moment, as it could possibly be. A gaping divide that continues to be an abscess on the face of the earth. But indeed, to address these social ills needs a hell of a lot of what I call totally turning around these failed systems, which continue to be openly welcomed by our consecutive governments who relish and indeed bask in the delight of keeping people on a mass scale, suppressing their ability to be able to earn, to be able to have a job. And when they do have jobs, the pay is absolutely dire within consecutive community blankets across this UK divide alone. We have people within families that have two jobs, and many of these people are so poorly paid for their efforts, they can barely afford rent. They skip food for their families and for their children. Could they? Can they possibly ever imagine being able to run an EV? Pardon me, I think not. Not indeed. They would imagine in their own lifetimes the luxury of being able to take on board even the most modestly spec'd and smallest EV possible. These words I share because I feel they are so utterly relevant, because our societies are so utterly broken, fragmented, and divided between those that do have the wonderment and indeed the stability and indeed the ability to be able to share in what I call the advancements indeed of technology for road use with EVs, which are wonderful things. And indeed, they continue to bring a redefining of purpose and moving us away from a fossil fuel industry, which continues to be that infected pimple indeed on the face of the landscapes of our earth. But it does have to be continued to be talked about, and it does have to be brought to the global fore, in my opinion, that in order to have blanket coverage of EVs for all in every country, we need to address the social ills that are holding millions and billions of people away from ever being able to own them because of the fact that their incomes are so far away and so small. And indeed, their ability to even, as I've said, be able to nurture and give their families a future is utterly non-existent in its entirety. These people are the forgotten heroes of our planet. Be it in the UK, of which I know and I've seen so many situations of so many of my geographical regions in the UK, in the depths of poverty. And I have studied and looked at that poverty for 40 odd years and more, and I know only too well those geographical nations across my own UK homeland. As indeed Oliver knows, in London alone, are so gaping and so stark and so divided. Indeed, London, we have billionaires and trillionaires rubbing shoulders with people that don't have two pennies, literally, proverbially, with the words to rub together. We have people here in a great nation like London, which is a diverse, indeed, totally seamless, or what wants to be seen as seamless, cultures upon cultures of people that are bustling and jostling for supremacy within their own, indeed, lives and mindsets. But indeed, as we talk about a great city like London, the divide is enormous. Our government in Westminster has single-handedly guided the failure across the board of our entire UK country when it talks about failure of giving people who are downtrodden, who are deprived through no fault of their own. Some of the most incredible, hardworking, dexterous, and truly inspiring people across the UK landscape alone have been downtrodden and suppressed and forgotten and chewed and spat out by our own UK government. And that continues to be the proverbial state of play across consecutively from country to country in so many geographical locations. Leaders, politicians, governments continuing to fail the people and not give them the chances of being able to have not just a sustainable income bracket that enables them to get onto the ladder of owning an EV, but a sustainable income bracket so that they can shield the wolf from the door, that they can actually have a roof over their head and pay for their rent, never mind about having a mortgage, which in today's perilous times is another abyss which continues to threaten and engulf us in so many different ways. That what we call the utopian dream, one of many in the United Kingdom, of having a mortgage slipping away, as Oliver knows only too well from the way things are. Not just the past financial state, but indeed financial states of affairs that are dictated and governed by every single shower and failure of UK politicians, as I say these words, too absolutely gilded with the absolute gifted ability to have failure of policy after policy to do or say or instigate anything for the greater good of the hardworking man and the hardworking person at every conceivable level. A massive failure, yes. And that's just the start of the affairs of the situation that we have. If we want to be able to reshape, as I said, our collective economies, to be in favor of people on a mass scale, to have that just transition of electric vehicle use in its entirety, we have to give those people the proper chances, the proper ability to be able to have incomes that can mean they can have that switch and that move over. I have a lot more to say about it, but that will keep. I want to give the microphone back to you, Pop. I know you have more to
Yeah.
share with.
I think it's, I've been thinking a lot about what Sandy talks about, the environmental umbrella. And that's kind of what I want to do too, like Sandy does. Everything environmental, if it's mystical, if it's science, if it's social, if it's cultural, all of it. I want to cover all of it. And Robert and I do share a similar politic in general in this life, even though we live in different continents and country. Our political outlook is pretty similar. But when we get to the eco-socialism, when we get to the wealth inequality crises, these are all parts of it. And then when we get to the deep green ecology people, they almost don't care what humans are doing. And I have a great sympathy for that too. So it's all good. I think our one of our common failings as a group is to start arguing a little bit too much about the details under the umbrella. And I think it's central to take other people's points and not really argue them too much. That there's a place for all this, and for the social, political people, fine, go to your protest, go and petition your senators, do your thing. For each of us to do our job, within our context. We know Pup has his projects. It doesn't mean everybody has to go out and build a solar, array, but it's excellent if you can. It's excellent if you can protest. It's all good. I think that theme of environmentalist unity is really the central point for me, and it's all good. We don't have to agree, and we're not going to agree on every single detail of everything. So while I basically agree with Robert's points of views, I also see how for so many other environmentalists, it's just not what they're focusing on. And that's okay. For the people who aren't engineers and aren't scientists and aren't technical, they're going to have some issues or troubles focusing on what Pup's focusing on. And that's okay too. We're all in this together. And our love of nature, our love of these animals and the oceans and the sky is what keeps us together, and what should propel us forward, and propel us forward in our communication to all the other people out there who don't quite get it. So that's sort of my central message. And let's get back to Pup, who I think you're glad to be alive, man. That deer didn't get you.
Yeah.
I was sure.
Yeah,
I was sure that you hit the bear. Actually,
no, I shoot bears, but only if I have to. Um, I just the reason I raised my hand is my best friend and brother is attending a No Kings rally in the state of Colorado. I'm not sure which rally he's at. I just asked him. But I'm about to post a picture of the peaceful protest where he's at right now. And it's easily thousands of people there. So I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that it's a peaceful protest, and there are thousands of people, and this is just one of the locations in Colorado. There are, if I remember right, there are 13 cities here in Minnesota that are have No Kings rallies going on. In keeping with the title of the room, Alex. Anyway, but I'll post that in a second. Give me a second.
absolutely, man. There are No Kings rallies all around the world. I've got one in front of me. I see Mehdi Hassan speaking somewhere. The official NoKings.org stream. I saw people in Athens, Greece. I saw a Greek woman in a Wonder Woman outfit in the center of Athens protesting. It is massive and huge. And that right to public assembly is a cornerstone of democracy. That you can go out to the public square and have public assembly, have your protest. In our history, we had the Boston Massacre, where the British troops killed 6 Americans, including a Black American. A big part of our history, why that is so important to us. I think that these times we are all sharing together. Yeah.
Yeah, the picture is from Greenlee, Colorado.
Greenlee, the great state of Colorado. I think these times we're all sharing together in our odd digital social life, and that's going to be a feature of our life moving forward. from here on in. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Oliver in London. And Ollie never forgets the animals and nature and the sky. Somehow he's always in touch with nature 24/7. What's up, Ollie?
Hi, Alex. Hi, everyone. I was actually, first of all, I'm literally outside of what was one of the main London, what do you call it, schools, if you like, of the Syracuse University. This is where all the kids came to do some of the, not all of their lessons. They had two campuses. This was one of them. It's very grand. And I'm just doing my walkabout, and I'm just literally outside it now. And this was Syracuse, of course. These are the kids who got killed in the Lockerbie disaster in the Pan Am, made of the skies, I think. Made of the skies in, oh, my goodness, I should be able to get the date right. 19, oh my goodness, early, certainly. 89?
89, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And they obviously they closed down the campus here. It finished after that because so many kids were killed that were here, and now it's a private residence. But the house remains largely as it was, and it just strikes me the craziness of humans. And what Robert was saying as well, the kind of the weirdness of some people having to have so much money and it become a competition tool and a pointlessness within itself. I was reading about Getty, for example. Oh my God, honestly, installing a payphone on his country residence. I think here it was in the UK for his staff and friends to use because he was that tight. It's just weird. I wouldn't pay for the kids' ransom. Well, that's more believable in some ways, but oh my goodness, what a mean old git, but what Robert was saying was quite true. I mean, I've just been in Hounslow Central and Hounslow West, which is the west of London. It's basically the kind of town it's not really a town, it's part of London that feeds Heathrow Airport. That's where all the people who live in Hounslow, really, they mostly all work at Heathrow because it's, that's the work, if you like. That's the local work. It's very, very Asian, and it's not really multicultural. It's really very, very Asian and very very poor as well. So they're not getting that well paid. Whoever's working at Heathrow, they're not. No, they're probably baggage handlers and checkout people and groundsmen and so on. It's a hard life for them, and it's either part of, or it is part of. It is definitely part of the world we're coming into, which is, as Pup was pointing out with the EVs, is a what do you call it? Is really a kind of well, I would say we're like space cadets, really, aren't we? We're moving into this new era, and we're trying to get away from this old era, which is dragging us down and which has done so much damage. We are moving into this new era, and we're sort of going into it slowly now, and we're in a freaked out state because we know we can't necessarily fix all of the damage. We can try to, but we won't fix all of the damage and stay the way we are, and stay. The world will not stay the way it is that we have known. There's a nostalgia for it almost, but it's not going to remain the way it is. So, for example, Kim has been talking about corals. I had a good DM with her about this yesterday, and it got me thinking more and more about this. What do we call it? When I've forgotten what it's called now. The in the new sort of space cadet age. Help me. What's it called?
Tipping points?
No. No. We see domes in beautiful eco zones and fantastic ideas about living in a new age. And come along.
Oh, like solar punk?
Solar punk, yeah. So it got me thinking along the times of solar punk and trying to take some of this damage with us. We're not going to be able to. You inspired me, Kim, actually, because you were really so. We have to try and save this. We have to stop this now. And then you realised, and you were pointing it out to me, that we've lost this one. We've lost the corals. We've actually lost them now. It's a lost thing. We can't do it because the massiveness of the ocean, the ocean temperatures is killing them basically, and we can't turn the clock back on that now. So we're basically we're stuck with what we've given ourselves basically, and I thought, yes, that's true. We probably are. We're stuck with what we've created. We're losing the corals. What can we do instead? So I go back to that idea that we have to somehow try and create these artificial environments on the land where we can actually take as much of the biosphere as we can and really throw money at it and really try and save as much of it as we can and keep it in a state of readiness and also develop it as well. Keep it going over many generations, so that at a time, sometime in the future, when we do possibly manage to get the ocean temperatures back down again, we can reintroduce it. I know that sounds fantastic and weird, but it's not that fantastic. There are a number of people who are doing rich transformations across the world at the moment with, I don't know how much success. I don't see how, without biospheres, how they can actually make them work, but they are doing them nonetheless. Saudis are doing one. I think they're doing one in Costa Rica. The billionaires are trying to literally push back time, but they're trying to do it within the existing biosphere. It doesn't work for me. The only thing I can see happening is semi-underground, semi-overground, trying to save as much as we can above ground, and developing what we can underground. But it's a very long project. It does require on your other big project of recent days, which is solar energy, of course. It's obvious that we're going to use solar energy for this. So a solar punk world with solar energy, with saving as much as we can in these kind of biospheres on Earth, under the Earth as well, taking people with us too. People love it. People see. I was walking around Westfield. They love it down there. They go there at the weekend. It's like a treat for them. They feel so at home there. So enormous Westfields, where everybody will live. This is the future. It's going to be a big solar punk future. I can see it happening. We can hold back as much of this damage as we can try to and fail, or we can let what goes, save what we can. Obviously try and keep as much of it above ground going, and have this backstop thing going on at the same time, both in biospheres and underground. I think that's there's something different there. It's slightly different. I'll flesh it out a bit more. I just, it's what I would call a pour out that I was having on this subject. It's not like me, really, is it? But I was having it nonetheless, and I do enjoy it. So I'll leave that one there. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. I think there is always room for hope. Definitely, it is very disheartening to learn about the lower limit of the tipping points for the warm water coral reefs being passed. I mean, they've just, they've gone through so much in the past decades with global temperatures going up. Last year, between 1.3 and 1.4 degrees Celsius, they say the lower threshold for the tipping point for warm water corals is about 1.2 degrees. So they're being degraded. The special symbiotic relationship between the animal, which is the coral polyps, and the special algae, which gives it its color and allows it to perform photosynthesis, is very degraded, very broken. The warm water coral reefs are the most biodiverse ecosystem on Earth. even more biodiverse than the Amazon rainforest. It's this tipping point. I mean, people say, well, can it still be saved? From what the scientists who study this are saying, it's 99% certainty that it is tipped, given that their upper range of their thermal tipping point is 1.5 C. And it seems like we're going to pass 1.5 C within the next decade. So right now they're like on a life support system. What is needed, yeah, is like what you're talking about, Oliver, are these we need new approaches, because now it's not just climate change that we have to discuss. It's passing these tipping points, and as the scientists point out, that many of these tipping points are connected, and one of them tipping could cause tipping in other points. With the coral reefs, it's very much connected to AMOC. It's connected to the Greenland ice sheets, because as the temperature rises, the Greenland ice sheets are melting. That's causing the AMOC currents to slow down and not to function as they have, and that affects the warm water coral reefs, because the colder water from the North Atlantic isn't being exchanged in these lower latitudes. Um, so it's just too warm for them. And then also they've had the mass bleaching events, um, which is like basically the extreme heat waves, the marine heat waves that we've seen in the last couple of years. I think also in terms of the way I've been thinking about it's like this isn't just like one species going extinct, although that's bad enough, but this is like a viable, crucial part of the whole ocean ecosystem. It's an ecosystem in its own right. Um, I mean, I think it's nobody knows, what the impacts are going to be, but there will be huge ecological and economic impacts. 30% of the fish spend part of their life cycle around these coral reefs. The small island nations, which are, already facing so many of the effects of climate change, rely on these corals not just for tourism dollars, but for fishing. They also help, sort of mitigate against the effects of hurricanes. They're going to be losing a lot of that protection. So will Florida and Mexico. I mean, it's just it's really devastating. But I mean, and the main thing is, they say on the large global scale, the only thing we could do is decarbonize, because decarbonize, and they're also calling for, we need to draw down the carbon immediately, because we have to, if there's even that small chance of saving these, we have to limit the amount that we go over 1.5 C. And the problem is, a lot of the commitments that we've made with the Paris Accord, right now we're on track for like 2C. So we need, even more to be done in terms of global commitments there. I was just thinking, and I know Oliver's been talking about this a lot of, is the Ocean Treaty, how it's there on the cusp of this happening, but it may prove at least too late for this ecosystem, hopefully for not other ecosystems. But this is, again, something the scientists have been saying for years now. We can't wait. If we wait until something tips or something happens, it's too late. Like, we've probably lost this for 14 generations. We talk a lot about, the indigenous way of think 7 generations ahead. I did the math. And being conservative, it's like 14 generations. And what will be, the effects of all the systems that are linked to it and stuff like that. But like Oliver says, I mean, there are people that have coral nurseries on land, that are doing things with trying to make them evolve so they're more heat resistant. But I think in reality, we need to see this as we need to start making choices to stop the damage, to save what we can, because we're definitely have lost like it's kind of a functional extinction of an ecosystem, and even if we can save some of it, it won't be the same biodiverse place that it was previously.
Yeah, Kim, I hear the pain and sadness in your voice, and I always sort of think I'm running an AA meeting or something, and these conversations I have with the American socialists, the South African socialists this week, but the Americans in particular, getting a different viewpoint on these problems and issues, right? Suddenly, talking to people aren't thinking of the environment at all. They're thinking of social orders, wealth inequality, the way that capitalists exploit the working class is their issue, and they were feeling positively hopeless in terms of the USA, that they were making no progress. So I know about our environmental struggles and how we so often feel in our various countries and around the world, how we're making no progress. We know about the 5 Ps, things like plutocrats and petrostates. And the forces that be that we talk about so often, the huge corporations, the huge governments, business as usual, drilling that oil, distributing the oil, burning it, increasing the parts per million in the air, the temperature rising, the sea heating up, the oceans heating up, the pH of the oceans changing, and these valuable habitats like coral reefs being destroyed. Whether the destruction is direct, like logging for a road, just cutting the rainforest right down, or whether the destruction is indirect, it is happening. We are unable to communicate to our fellow citizens so far this situation. This situation is objective. It is what is happening out there today. It's not an impression of ours, something we're emotionally perceiving. These are the facts on the ground. So we are unable to communicate to the general public out there this situation. And the commercial interests, backed by their government cronies, are able to present their image of Disneyland, of flying around the world with your family for your 3-week holiday, of eating all that greasy, awful food. They are able to present their vision to you and succeed. And all our country people believe in their fantasy vision of this cruelty and obscenity. And that's what we're faced with. That's what our new socialist allies are faced with, and that's the way this reality is, and we have to do something about it. So we've discussed this for years, making allies, forming coalitions, improving our own communication, getting out there, and it's a whole range of emotion. I know that Jennifer knows exactly what I'm talking about. I know she works on this very hard, from her own perspectives and avenues. And I'm glad she's here. I'm always glad Jennifer is with us. Jennifer, what is going on? How is Germany today? Hi.
Cloudy, as well, my region, but yeah, let's not talk about weather. We are talking about climate here, and that's why. So there are not many people are able to fly. I think it's about 2 or 4% of the people are able to fly at all, and so it's yeah, it's kind of a misused privilege that so many people are flying anyway. And But we need to talk about what I wanted to add is about the coral reefs, and there are like the most 9 tipping points that are depicted in most of the books or in the studies, but I think in the IPCC there will be about 20. The Amazonas is one part of it, and what I missed in one article on our most popular news channel was that they are not saying that we need to stop fossil fuels, and we need to stop it much earlier, and that's why also the same scientist writing about that we might hit one tipping point with the dying coral reefs that might be lost, because it's just too warm. There are also warm coral reefs, but these are also acclimated to a special temperature, and when the ocean gets even hotter, and it even can't also um, save enough CO2 in it, and so it's even becoming something that is producing CO2 as well. And so that's why we also need to look to keep to 1.5 degree. And we are at the moment we are 1.3 or 1.4 degree, and it's possible to have like a rebound effect, so that we are for a short period of time over the 1.5%, and then we bounce back, because CO2 is reduced to some CO2 sinks, but a lot of woods and other places are becoming CO2 emittents and not sinks anymore. And that's why we really need to stop with this with fossil fuels, and a rise in photovoltaic or agri voltaic especially might even help with it, because we have other things to produce energy, and energy is something that keeps yeah helps us make food, keeps us warm, and produce food and transport it or whatever. And so energy is essential for every country to have it, and whoever changed the system will have a lot of we might be attacked. So we have to really stop using fossil fuels, and photovoltaic and batteries and wind energy and hydro is one way to do it. And this is also something that some scientists call that it's a social tipping point, which can change a lot in how we produce energy and get back to the bounce back later to 1.5 degree, so that we won't have coastlines swept over, and there's, I think it's 130 million metropoles on the coastlines that might be affected by if we won't stop it. And some of you might live there, so it's not that it will happen tomorrow, but a scientist now, it was last month, they said the meteorological and the physical society, as two different societies, um, published a paper where they said the 3 degree more will be reached not by the end of this century, but by 2050. So everything you say about what might happen after 3 degree might happen 50 years earlier, and this is only 25 years from now. Everything we thought we might can do to stop it, we have to do earlier. The good thing is that we are much quicker now with solar and wind energy, and especially batteries, and the price is really falling, and introducing it to the economies it's sometimes even happening without the support of the states. India is a great example. I think Pakistan was it as well. Yet China is driving it the most, and it was developed in Germany, the photovoltaic. But it's China won it, and they will help anyway to even to help Africa. And it's not like they are so humanistic, because they make money of it, and they know that they might be a driver of of this technology and earn a lot of money with it and be like a leader in it on the market. And this is profits also the states in Africa, that they don't fall for small modular reactors, or for even more fossil um, infrastructure. And yeah, so this might be something good as well, but we really need to push it.
And push it, we do. I mean, we're pretty good at that. We stick to it with consistency. We gather day after day, week after week, and we do push it. And we find ourselves, we care about the environment, we care about nature, we care about plants and animals, oceans and rivers, mountains and the tundra. We care about nature. It's every day. It's just getting more and more important to me. I walk through these New England woods twice a day. It's just getting more and more important to me. And at this time of year, we have the fall foliage, the leaves turning colors, and the season's changing, and it just means a lot to me. And we want to see these environmental laws in our respective nations. That's what we want to see. We need governments to make the laws to protect the climate, to protect the animals and the habitats. That's essentially what we want to see. And yet you have interests like fossil fuels, 12, $13 trillion a year, that are enormously powerful. They don't care about the environmental situation, the situation in nature. They're just not interested at all. They simply want to increase their business. They want to get a larger and larger share of global economics. And yet they too are facing physical limits. They really can only have so large an economic share, which they've probably already overstepped. All these government subsidies, all their investments in governments and politics, I think they've really maxed out. And within the next year and a half, we expect peak oil. We expect that maximum of oil, and then for the rest of our lives, a reduction in oil production for the rest of our lives. We got flaring. 6% of all this greenhouse gas, CO2, is due to flaring, just burning so-called natural gas methane. They just burn it. It's cheaper for them to just burn it on an oil field than to cap it or to use it or to capture it. So 6% of all CO2 is from flaring that does absolutely nothing. That's always something that spoke to me about how their 19th century business model is. So these are facts. This is physical, objective reality. This is not my opinion. This isn't some fantasy song. These are objective facts out there. Coral reefs are at tipping points. Flaring is all over the place. And forests we have perpetual deforestation. We have dead whales. We have all of this. So we are unable to communicate fast enough to our fellow countrymen. The goal here is in communication, in supporting each other, supporting our morale, supporting our lifestyles, our books, our gardening, our cooking, right? I think it was Jennifer was just talking about airplanes and how 4% can fly. We know an airplane ticket is expensive, $1,000, $2,000. We know a lot of people in this world live on $1,000 a year. So I haven't flown for 25 years, and I hear Jennifer talking. I'm like, I'm probably never flying again. I'm so angry at an airline, airline companies. I'm probably not getting near their business anyway. But Chloe was talking about today in the woods about how awful airports are. I'm just so glad I don't have to go to the airport. I don't want to get anywhere near an airport. So we can support each other, with our words, and we can communicate to those adjacent to us. For whatever reason, Robert, I have been talking to Bobby, and I like Bobby. I talk about chemistry. I don't know Bobby Digital. I talk to Bobby. I'm like, yo, Bobby, what's up? I feel relaxed suddenly, human to human, and that's a key aspect of our business. Who we get along with well around here, we can actually pick and choose. You know, who we have in spaces, who we chat with, who we group around with, and that's okay. I think the Sandy's umbrella environmentalism idea, and I hear you, Robert. You do enjoy the social justice side of it, climate justice, environmental justice, and that's who you are. That's cool. You know, we can give you a little bit of a label there. I don't know, man. It's beyond Oliver's idea of just keep going. I don't know what we got.
Indeed. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
please,
Alex.
please, man.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I'm just going to make sure I get the old hand
Oh,
in.
yeah, I pretty much have run out of gas anyway.
Yeah, I did. I wondered actually for a minute whether Kim, you wanted to share some words, and then you the other speaker on. So, do you want to say something, Kim, before I speak?
Oh,
I know you want to
oh,
say
thank you,
something.
Robert. Well, I was just gonna add on a bit to what Alex was saying. Just just thinking about like it's great, obviously, to have this space to be able to work through some ideas. What does passing a tipping point mean? Like is it for real this time? Because we've heard about planetary boundaries being passed. What does it mean that we've passed the warm water coral reef tipping point? Of what does it make people like? How do you feel about that? What do you think about that? What are the repercussions? Today, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. I mean, I think I think it's very bad, because I think there's gonna be a domino effect just within, like, the food chain, and I know, so many people, especially poor people, rely on the ocean for food, that it's I think it's gonna have a very negative effect on the fish supply. I think it's going to be very harmful for the Caribbean islanders, who they rely on people to go there, eating fish, having the seafood diets, enjoying their vacations. Maybe people go out snorkeling. That's not going to be there for them anymore. So yeah, I'm just, I am really saddened because we should have done better, really. I mean, it's just and the thing is, we could talk about socialism and communism, which are systems that exploit the world's resources and nature's resources just as much as capitalism does. I'm a socialist at heart myself. I have unionism in my family, but if we look at the socialist economies of the world, although they distribute income more fairly, they're still exploiting the environment, just as any economic system is. Although, with donut economics, we could talk about, how to be economically sustainable. It means that you have to be ecologically sustainable as well, and obviously we're not doing that, but yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think it's good that we talk about all these things. And you know what? It's okay sometimes if we don't feel hopeful, because those are things that we have to work through too. And really, I think what I want to get from this personally is like a wake up call for my own way that I live my life, and that to say that if it's not a priority now, when will it be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I certainly, Robert, my inner environmentalist has woken up,
Yeah.
and And you guys mean a lot to me. You know, day after day, here, year after year. I also think that, as Kim asked, what does it mean that the coral reefs are collapsing? And this stuff will keep collapsing until the commercial interest and the political interest, it starts affecting their world. Like she says about fish, when there just aren't any more fish, the price of fish will be astronomical, and the people will actually finally notice. We'll see our democratic systems starting to cope with these environmental truisms. At some point, they can't band-aid and hide and put on makeup and pretend. At some point, their environmental fantasy will collapse, that the great green world is still there and you can still drive your car around and fly around and go to hotels and spend money and throw trash out the window. At some point, their entire fantasy will collapse. And they're so quick, the politically and economically, they'll adjust their programs to solar punk in a heartbeat. They'll flip over the moment it's economically favorable for them. Their industries will flip to solar punk in a moment. So it's frustrating for us in the meantime. And somehow in my odd artistic vision, I just see that path. It isn't quite logical like Pup is talking about. Pup did a really good job today of describing the logic of how cheap. If you got to have a car, Robert, I heard your point too. I'm not against anybody's point. We've discussed that, how there are only a billion cars in the world, in wealth and equality. But in America, if you got to have a car, in Canada, you got to drive to work. Why not have the EV and save all that money? About Pup's logical appeal and science under siege. Because science are under siege, people are not thinking logically, and they're not doing what they instead they buy something with really low gas mileage that weighs 5 tons. And here we are, Robert. So feel free to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Alex,
No, it's all right.
Alex, by the way, you're starting to robot.
Yeah.
That's not, the sound is not so great.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I sound acceptable on the microphone, Alex, before I say it?
Yes.
Thanks, Jennifer. It is appreciated. Thank you for that, Jennifer. Yeah. Some points really to really add to the fact of what I was saying earlier, Alex. I'm at one with Pope and the EV consensus of indeed future green pathways to a collective, not just giving PUP the advantages of which are clearly evident. I'm completely, I couldn't be more on board with the situation. My indeed observations, I think I needed to call them really, was simply of the fact that I would like to see every conceivable person that is possible to be able to have the advantage of having an EV on this earth, be able to be financially and economically dexterous and able enough to be able to achieve that collective ability. And I know the social imbalances of financial status across our planet are so divided that there will continue to be over many years, as I even say these words now, in fact, even decades, alas. I'm sorry to have to say them, don't even want to have to say them, because I know that what I call the imbalances are seriously stopping the ability for so many more people to take advantage of what I call the wonderfulness of being able to have that EV capacity within so many people who already have one. But I think I'll put it like this: that until we change the total social imbalances across our society, the financial imbalances which continue to impede, which is the word I need, impede the ability for hardworking families and people to be able to get on the ladder of owning an EV. Because this is what we're talking about here. Of course, we all have a consensus in this room that we want everyone to be able to share and involve themselves with the pleasure and the what I call the moving forward of having an EV at their disposal. Who wouldn't want to go down that path of enlightenment? You would indeed be completely stuck in the proverbial past, the fossil fuel past, if you did not want to be able to embrace the all the advantages of technology of that electric vehicles are able to give you. So we're all fully on board with that. But what we need to be fully on board with, not speaking collectively of everyone in the room, but I'm speaking about the people across our planet from community to community, country to country. We have so much financial imbalance, of which indeed we have so many people that, as I've said earlier in my observations, struggling to make ends meet. We need to bring our societies structurally and integrally in line with giving people the ability and having the incomes to have the ability to be able to have EVs. If we can continue to do that in the years ahead and the decades ahead, we really, really, really will strive forward with bringing more and more EVs to the hardworking man, the hardworking people, hardworking women, indeed, of our countries. I think, indeed, EVs, like anything else when we talk here, and indeed in all other room spaces which are environmentally conscious minded, I might add, it's a work in progress, but a work in progress indeed, where I see the path, and indeed I see a very collective, sure footed, encompassing, and what I call structurally and integrally sound path with confidence to move forward with having the ability to own an EV. But we need to be able to have the social structures within our societies that continue to erode financial and impede the ability to own an EV. While we continue to have that imbalance, we will not have everyone on the earth being able to own an EV. It's a financial impossibility. But I know all of us in the room are pretty well geared up to know that. But indeed, these words I know need to be shared simply because I know we have many people listening outside who kind of are asking the questions, and rightly so, about how do we bring so many people forward. Indeed, I'm at one with Pup's every single word that he shared, as I always have been and always will be. Indeed, when he talked about the fact that he cannot understand why everyone is not owning an EV. Indeed, they are words of consensus that are unilaterally indeed welcomed in every heartbeat. But as indeed the reason why not everybody is owning an EV is a financial one. Not because they don't want to own an EV, I might add. It's because, as I said, because of the great structural imbalances of incomes and wages across our planet that forbid so many people the access of an electric car, an electric vehicle. This is what we have to socially, morally, ethically, and indeed structurally change to the very heartbeat and core of all our systems. Because until we get to grips with that total social rewiring, if you will, that structural rewiring. Governments in a mass scale are to blame, of course they are. Couldn't be anything else. Systems on a mass scale to blame, of course they are. Couldn't be anything else. Indeed, everything that is suppressing people that have a need to be able to move, not just technologically, but green fingered forward for all the right reasons. They're being impeded by imbalance and injustices. When we talk about people's incomes, people's ability to have a level playing field, a level balanced ability to live like their neighbors have the access of doing. We have people, I'm coming back to the UK again. It is an example purely as I know, but it is a very relevant one being as I do live in the UK. I will say that when you look around you, you take any given street in any geographical location in the United Kingdom, just indeed, without too much getting to the ums and ahs of the situation. You see, one neighbour, for example, has a shiny new EV on the drive. Another neighbor next to them not doing so well financially. Maybe got 3 or 4 kids, medium-sized house, two, 3-bedroom semi-detached. Usually the norm in, a United Kingdom situation for a hard-working person before they're able to financially move up to a 4-bedroom one, if they're indeed able to survive the rigors of financial seas, if you will. And indeed, this is an example. You'll have a neighbor with a brand new shiny EV, and then you'll have neighbors next door to them with petrol engined fossil fuel driven cars, which are older registration plates, which still persist and continue across the United Kingdom. I'm sure Oliver knows only too well when I talk about the fact how many millions upon millions of fossil fuel cars there still are, not least in London, but across the UK. We know indeed that in able to have everyone get on board with the EV revolution, we need to have that balance of wages, that balance of income. When people feel financially secure within their family, they can make empowered decisions to be able to choose these EVs, to be able to choose the ways of being able to safeguard the normal living, working conditions of their own collective family units. We are all championing that because we are all wanting that for the greater good of all our fellow neighbors. We always did. But we know the social ills, we know the social imbalances are still rife. My points and observations, I hope, are pretty crystal clear. We challenge the social ills on a mass scale, not just within my United Kingdom, but every single country. All countries are facing governments that, if they're not corrupt, they're inept, they're lazy, and they're mass greedy on the greedy scale like never before in history. We all know the fundamental situations of every collective government, what they are and what they are not doing. We need to focus, indeed, on changing the very structures of those systems that allow those inept, lazy, and greedy governments to persist, to function in the way that they do, because they are not giving the public what they want. They are not giving the people what they want. The people, indeed, are crying out for the most mass, indeed, unilateral, unequivocal change in order to make their human living conditions on a day-to-day basis. We don't want to use the word bearable. That's not good enough. We want living conditions, fair pay, fair rights. We want balanced pay and rights for those that have been downtrodden and left and ground into the dirt for too long. We want that ability for every single system within the collective communities at local and national level, I might add. Because this is where people fall through the gap. This is why I champion human rights to the very core of me as a person, and I always will do. Because I care deeply about every single particle of everybody's human rights on this earth, no matter what geographical location, no matter what country you're in. Because I know the imbalances of injustice are absolutely monumentally gaping and continue to be by the day. Indeed, Kim's words, we can do better. You're not wrong, Kim. We certainly can. We can do better as a collective global society and the nations in their entirety. We're not doing it because our social structures are continuing to impede our progress. We collectively in the room say that's not good enough, of course, because we are green with social and democratic and human rights justice with our very heartbeats of existence in here. And indeed, hopefully, many of us outside the room are equipped when they listen to these words, I hope, to take on board just how absolutely massively and unequivocally important human rights justice is in achieving the social status, the green revolution, the green change, the collective green seamless responsibility of transition that is continuing to be denied so many people. Of course, we can do so much better. We need to be able to redefine the shackles, indeed, of what we have been given, the shackles which continue to bind and chain us in our societies and our collective local and national communities at every single level. We say no more on this ability, indeed, to allow systems to continue to suppress us, It's why I continue to say that until this social and structural change, this ineptness within our systems is fundamentally put aside in favor of what I call the ability in order to put these systems to rights for the greater good of the mass public and the people. Nothing less. Indeed, we have seen what we are having as a result, indeed, within our systems of not giving the public what they want. Massive social imbalances will continue to persist until we get a handle on this, until we get a grip on it. But we can get a grip on it if we continue to allow these systems to be the prevailing and driving forces of our local and our national communities. Social change, it's a very revered and indeed important capsule in transporting people on a mass scale for the greater good. Social change, indeed, can be at entirely different levels within any given countries. We have to remember that the way social change is perceived, understood, and collectively put in place differs from continent to continent, from environment to environment, from community to community. Social change in Australia or Asia is going to be at a different pace and structural level to social change in Europe and indeed in America and indeed the continents which are within that geographical location. Different geographical locations, different structures and levels and time capsules and scales of social change. But the fact remains, if we are to have a society that can bloom and flourish with collective incomes available for people on the scales of which we have not seen available to people that continue to be downtrodden to the very core of their existence, this is something that I feel morally, socially, and ethically totally reprehensible to my core and being as a person. I am totally, how can I put this, sick to the core of seeing systems that do not give people not just the basic human rights, but human rights to be able to allow for them to have their family bloom and grow and flourish, and indeed be able to earn, and indeed be able to provide for their families not in just an existence. This is what is socially wrong across the board, because governments are only allowing us as public, whatever our geographical location globally, to exist. We don't want to exist. We want to have the ability of human rights within our systems to allow a balanced scale of systems, ability, and pay, and the ability to let our families collectively be safeguarded, not just from climate and environmental harm, I might add. Hear me, no. There's far, far more to it than that. We need to be able to have that bloom and that indeed stability of intent be fundamentally entwined for every single hard working person, be it if they have a family or they not have a family. Excuse me, will I clear my voice? To wrap up, because I know we have hands, I have far more to say on the subject, but that will be kept till later. We must, how can I put this, under no uncertain terms, accept the second best ideologies which continue to persist within governments, local communities, and local governments. Because remember, local governments have become so fragmented and so unresponsive and so unwilling and so unguided in every principle which they conduct themselves from country to country, that we are in the systems of disintegration and meltdown which continue to persist across our own geographical locations. Of course, these systems are ripe for total and utter unequivocal change. Why would they not be? When you have people in the depths of utter, uncontrolled, and unrelenting poverty, struggling to be able to earn, struggling to be able to give their family any semblance of a future, you realize just how collectively, how far systems and indeed the application of people working within those systems has to be driven now, to be guided, to be steered for the greater good. Having said that, I'm going to take a pause. Alex, microphone back to you, brother. And we'll get
Yeah, thanks, Robert. With that social side of the story, that is where a lot of the answers are. But we do have Jennifer. Jen, you're up next. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, there's a good reason why one of the SDGs is inequality that we need to fight. And I think it's more important that we go out and talk to other people and also tell them that. And because here mostly all know it, so it's I don't think that inequality and the consequences for a just transition is a thing here because we know it. And but what I wanted to say about is that, for example, um, I didn't want it to seem like I would say that all flying is bad because there are some reasons. For example, the COP, because a lot of poor countries are underrepresented there, and it's really necessary that these people get the chance to be part of it, to be part of the discussion there, and to tell people what how the climate change and the climate heating and it's a climate emergency for them as well, and or especially for them. And this year also at the COP there is talked about loss and damage. There's a big funding project where they yeah, because there are places where um, um, adaptation and mitigation won't be fully possible anymore, and so the people need yeah, need to be, yeah, have some, how do I spell it, how do I say it, it's a security issue. It's not only food, it's they get swept away, they could happen that yeah, the ocean comes too close. Also in the Caribbean islands, I know people there that have yeah, won't be possible to live there anymore because it's there. These islands, they are always close to the coast, and yeah, they will be, yeah, flooded completely. And it's not only that. I also talked to a professor, and she told she's having a homepage that's called climatenarratives.org, and there she collects narratives from all around the world about from refugees, and they are telling told the both he and the partner she's doing the research on is told them that the all wars, for example, mostly they are um, yeah, they happened after the imbalance of the state yeah, took place because of yeah, floods, because uh, dry phases where they couldn't where the crops failed, and where people couldn't people have already felt much earlier before that they not only had to go out for fishing 400 meters from their coast, but 1,000 meters and even more, and it makes it even harder for them to gain money to feed their people, and this is a really big problem for them. So there's a good reason why people still need should not be shamed for flying, because it's really necessary that they take part at the COP. Maybe not this year, but if some even next year, because it will still be a big problem, and there are a lot of fossil lobbyists who are campaigning and making possible that yeah, mitigation, when we talk about mitigation, and fossil fuel is not part of it, as well as stopping yeah, producing so much soya only for livestock, and um, especially also in near the Amazonas, it's a big problem that this will also really push the tipping points even more. And like Kim said, it's will having a domino effect, and it's such a, and the effects on our health, on on our crops, on also our economies, how they are work today, and even when you live near coasts, or where the infrastructure is near the coast, it will all be destroyed sooner as we think it could happen. Yes. And so it's really important that we really also tell about loss and damage, and that we tell what plans are that we really need to for example, go for the what I wanted to tell is about the action agenda of the COP, is that the points are, for example, transition energy and industry and transport, stewarding forest, oceans, and biodiversity, transforming agriculture and food systems, buildings, resilience for cities, infrastructure and water, fostering human and social development, and cross-cutting enablers and accelerators. And I mean, this is one of the platforms as well where people can tell what has happened, and I would really appreciate if more people from the global south would come up and tell what is necessary in their areas to be done, so that we even can spread these words. And because we always have our privileged view here, and because most, especially of the organizer group, we are from privileged states, even if we might not be privileged as most people maybe, but in these countries, it's still a privileged view we have, and that's what makes it more important that people come up, and or people that we go out and tell other people around in our areas how necessary it is, and that people also be able to go to the COP. And that's why flying it's really bad, and sometimes there might be other reasons also in privileged states where it might be necessary to fly. So if you have family somewhere, no one can shame you because you want to see your family now and then. But it's not like having holidays. I know in America you don't have that much holidays days as in Europe, but it's we really need to think how we do our holidays as well. And but it's not like it's not the same as people from poor countries who are fly for once maybe, or tries to participate to the COP, or to find work in other countries where it's really necessary to fly. And I found out myself that it's sometimes so much more expensive to fly, and to not fly, and you even produce more CO2 if you go the common ways and fail on the way than to fly once. But that's what I wanted to put in a frame as
Jennifer,
well. Yes.
thank you very much for that. I just want to do a quick add-on that, climate change is very much a social justice issue. The poorest people of the world, the people that are living in those island nations, they are mainly relying on the land and the oceans for their food. If we degrade them so much, they won't have that to rely on. I had the privilege of going to a small island as a teenager with a good friend of mine and her family was from there. And I think every meal I ate was something that was picked off a tree, or that was grown in a garden, or, a chicken that was raised, or people going out to the ocean to get something to eat. So, to we shouldn't compartmentalize this crisis with other crises, because this is the heart of it. This is the core of it. We depend on the earth for our resources. If we degrade those resources or allow ecosystems to collapse, human civilization will be right behind it.
Right on, Kim. I'd also like to really clarify in the future how the wealth inequality crisis and the climate crisis and environmental poly crisis are all intertwined, to really, really make that crystal super clear. Anyway, Dale has been waiting a long time. I suspect he's in the Nashville No Kings rally. How you doing, Dale?
No, I'm not at the rally today. I'm feeling a little bit physically unfit. I mean, I'm not in bad shape or anything. I'm just not feeling up to it. But I wanted to say something. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you
Yes,
sound
great.
pretty well. Yeah.
All right. So, something you said earlier, Alex, and I know, this is largely what you meant as well in saying it, but it just reminded me of this. And Robert, you know, he mentioned a few, points that I was going to make about that too. And so did Jennifer, for that matter. But, talking about the rich, and the moment they realize it's economically advantageous, to drive EVs or to do solar, and what it takes for them to realize that is like Pup was presenting to us. Just pay attention, to the actual economics of the thing, because more so than anybody else right now, the rich are capable of availing themselves of those savings, or that way to make money, as Pup was emphasizing. That they have it available. They have the funds and the resources to front that money that it would take to build the solar that would cover them, even with their big houses. With their big houses, they have big land. They have lots of land or lots of roof space, and they can you know they can provide themselves with enough solar to power themselves. Now, it's not to say that they shouldn't scale down their size, because that's another problem that the rich have, is that they're outsized in everything, including the size of their houses. But and then going beyond, having, the more wealthy you are, the more you have available to you to avail yourselves of those ways to make money, but you got to have the resources to do that to start with, is for the economies to become more ecological, or more socialist, if you will, and to prioritize the equality of all, and that these things that we're talking about, solar and EV and sustainable energy, are important for the operation of everything, for our health, for the for the welfare of the earth. And so, eco-socialist and ecological economics would tell us this is advantageous to us, to do it this way. The Chinese have started doing this, and have just kind of left, a lot of the rest of the world behind in terms of big governments doing things, because they don't have the they don't have the backlog of pressure on them, because they're doing what we have to survive, and so we're doing this, and they're becoming that they're bed. What's the word I'm searching for? They're giving themselves a big advantage, and the United States is missing out on dipping into that common good that they've sort of harnessed there. But so that we need to get that economics for all, so that they prioritize the access for all, so that everybody can benefit. So that's what I had to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale. I'm really glad David's here. Wilson was here earlier too, one of our old friends. I'm glad to see David, as always, with his Davidness, man. Southern California, science fiction, life. How's it going, David? How are you?
Really good. Reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. Samuel Clemens. Alex, thank you for your patience on not giving up on me after disappearing forever. Robert, I tuned in during your, what I would call, philosophical essay verbalized. I think it's fantastic. Robert, I want to specify specifically, you have nailed so many points so well with such humanity and heart. It is both moving, and I hope the recording of this will be listened to by others, because that is a real appeal to the humanity in all of us and the humanity in you. So my hat's off to you, my virtual hat. Oliver, Dale, good to see you again. Kim, Andrea. Um, I wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to go easy on the humor, just because, it would be too shocking after such a long gap to suddenly punish everyone dramatically. Oliver, I am in Ireland right now, so I'm a stone's throw away from the UK. And maybe in the next 2 or 3 months, we might actually get a chance to meet face to face in person. I will do what I can to make that happen. As you all know, the crops project is on hold, not because we can't do it or because our team doesn't want to do it, but for some funny reason, there seems to be some resistance in the United States and other areas towards carbon removal. And without, dwelling on the obvious, let's just say that we're ready to do the crops process when the world is ready to let us do it. When our own EPA won't give us a permit to do it, it's rather difficult. And as you know, currently in the United States, carbon removal and climate action are not exactly a high priority. Now, that said, I've been spending the last year working intensely on a project that is geared towards the long term. In other words, assuming we can survive to that, I'm working on a project that will enlighten people on potential use of technology in a way to solve climate and other problems. So, in other words, instead of working on a mitigation project, I'm working on a long term one, and what you might call barnstorming, or an example of what can be done. And that if we apply that globally, it would empower 8 billion people plus. The project will be announced on Friday. There will be press releases, there will be information, it will be posted on social media. I'm not going to pre-release it now, but I guarantee that all of you here will be the first to know about it. It's a collaborative project, it's multidisciplinary, it's multi-location, and it's designed to encourage, at a time of a lot of darkness, a light. And that's all I'm going to say, is that we're working on a project that could show what could be done and will cause people to think, well, wait a minute, if you can do this, oh my God, there's all these other wonderful things you can do. So we're going to try to light the way towards some optimism on how what's evolving technology and society wise can be turned in a way that empowers people, every single one of us, everywhere in the world. So cross your fingers that we get some traction on this, but don't be confused to think it's a non-environmental project, because if it's something that benefits people in every way, everywhere, then obviously it helps resolve climate issues in the long term. But this is a long-term vision encapsulated in a immediately interesting project. And, so once you see it, I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussions, and I'll be back on X, and maybe Alex and I'll host another little, instead of science fiction thing, maybe a little forum just discussing what we're doing, because it will probably get some attention, and be curious to see where it goes. Like everything, I jump in with both feet, and I have an amazing team that's working on this. And, it includes some of the people from the crops team and some other people from other locations and other stuff. So stay tuned, and that's all I got for now.
Hey, David, I glad to hear from you again. I missed you. But I wanted to come back at you with a pun, of all people. With you said a stone's throw away from Oliver. So was that a pun intended? since Oliver's a stonemason.
Well, I would say that, I measure distance in furlongs per fortnight. So, I won't, be pig-headed or,
Very good.
I leave no stone unturned.
Yeah. It's good to hear from you, David, and we do need you and your lightness and your views. Part of our club is organized for people to leave for a long time and come back, when they need us, so they're ready, or like you have something to announce. Is very much how we're organized. It's not an exception or unusual. As I say, Wilson was popped back in today after a long absence, and that is very much our thinking as a club. We're always open when people want to visit or say hi or drop in or whatever the case may be. Your project is exciting. I'm thinking of the guy, your crops project and us talking about it and discussing it, kicking the wheels. I was thinking of it because you're in Ireland, of the guy from Ireland with his app. He had an app he was trying to sell to us where the idea was to take photos of plastic around the world. And so you take the photo of plastic in nature and upload it to the app, and then you look. None of us could really make heads or tails of the guy's project. A tech guy. He seemed. I'm seeing some thumbs down here, but anyway, we were prepared to discuss a project and carry on. It is about environmentalism. It is about the love of nature. It is about being unified, having fun, having a laugh, getting together, supporting each other. The good, bad, and the ugly, just the way human life is. And it's exciting, David. It is exciting. He's come back to us. He's got a project he'll announce on Friday. We'll check it out and give positive and negative feedback, and life goes on. The global village, the humans that we are. And it is truly nice to hear from David and David's world that I had forgotten about, but it brings a chuckle to an old heart. And I had very kind words for you, Robert. David, my new climate crisis, environmental polycrisis solution, it is to let Robert do all the work. I'm his Colonel Parker. I'm now Robert's manager. So my new solution to all our problems is to let Robert solve them. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Thanks again for the microphone. I want to first of all send love and appreciation to you, David. Thank you so much, sincerely, brother, for your comments there. Warmly appreciated, David. And I might want to add, it's great to see you back in the room. And great, David, to hear your voice. I know your work is excellent, dedicated indeed, with a team of colleagues that are united in a green quest for the greater advancement, indeed, of what you are bringing forth and allowing to bloom. I will say, David, with great dexterity and determination. I thank you sincerely on an ongoing basis for your efforts. I know that they are warmly appreciated by everyone here and indeed out of the room. We know that you'll continue to strive for perfection, for results, and total integrity with the what you are able to bring forth. Indeed, with an environmental consciousness. Thank you again, David. As indeed, let me bring my hand down. There is no constructual need for it to stand like a shining beacon when my voice is already reverberating like a powerhouse almost. I do want to actually touch on something that, well, a few points actually. Being brief, I know we have Oliver and Katongli, but I do want to mention something, a few points that Dale and Kim mentioned about the fact, first of all, with Kim's observations, indeed, words about tipping points. It's something that I eagerly continue to learn about on an ongoing basis, why they're here, why they're relevant to us as a global public, a global humanity, why they must be taken deadly seriously and not dismissed, and why it is absolutely vital for the greater good of our survival as a humanity or 8+ billion of us, that we understand that these tipping points, we're already in them. They aren't some far-flung fantasy of decades away. We have already done enough damage fundamentally to our planetary systems, to our atmosphere, to the climate, to mean that tipping points have and continue to deteriorate our life force that we expect to cocoon us. But indeed, I'm afraid to say the reality, the crystal clear, cold, hard reality, is very different. These tipping points are already engaged, they are in progress, and every single climate scientist that I read the data on that exists on our planet for the greater good of bringing us crystal clear information is telling us and sharing with us with alarm bells that are ringing to a deafening nature if only certain ears on indeed a listening scale globally had the sense, the good sense indeed, to listen, look and learn, digest and understand key fundamental human elements which are sorely wanting. Yet again, no surprise there at all. These tipping points are indeed changing the very face and re-evaluating our ability to be able to survive, not just with our agricultural and food growing practices across our planet, but our ability to be able to feed 8+ billion people geographically across our planet. Because without a stable climate, you cannot have a stable, growing, flourishing food base of indeed the very first process of nurturing and indeed having the ability to bring those crops and let them bloom forth from the seedling start indeed to the full fruition of growth right the way through the scale to harvest, while you continue to have country after country disappearing, indeed community after community disappearing underwater, with indeed new flooding depths indeed of environmental catastrophic destruction, the like of which continue to be what I call fundamentally breaking record after record after record, week in, week out, month in, month out, and continues to do so. There is no leveling out here of the catastrophic events that are and continue and are already well underway to redefining the ability for crops to be able to be put in place in the first place, grown and nurtured. Every single factor on earth is redefining how food production and the ability to be able to grow food, not least on a mass scale, but on a community scale. If we take first and foremost, even before I use the word a mass scale of food production, we think about how food production is put in place, evaluated on a local community level. Even that now is under the most severe, and it is already well underway, life-threatening integral changed process of which we can barely, indeed geographically across our earth, in so many regions, come to terms with, not just mentally and financially, but constructually as well. Everything, and I do mean everything when it comes to the state of how we globally sustain feeding ourselves, is changing beyond all recognition. And what I call the terrifying nature of it is changing so fast with lightning speed that it is passing us as normal people in the street, if you will. It is passing us by. We do not realize we continue to see supermarkets stocked to the gills at the moment with every single availability of produce. We continue to see that abundance in our, what I would call, glorified, financially abundant Western world, not least in my own UK geographical location, where supermarkets are still in abundance with fruit and veg, and indeed with all foods. At the present time, yes, I grant you, it is only a temporary illusion, because when the situation truly bites, when there is no bread on the shelves, no white bread, no wholemeal bread, no bread of any seed variety of all, nothing within a bakery environment, within any given supermarket shelf, when indeed fresh produce becomes as rare as seeing a drop of water in the most parched regions of our planet, we will finally fundamentally realize with the most massive jolt and shocks that you can possibly have, that our food production has finally become and is in wipeout mode. And that food production now is going to fundamentally impact community after community, after millions, after millions, after millions, after billions of people on this earth, the like of which has never been seen before. And this is a wake-up call that I wish I did not have to reverberate. But I am critically aware of the fundamental destruction and indeed the total collapse, as indeed Kim has touched on. Those collapse of tipping points of which have brought us to where we are now. And they are absolutely terrifying. The public has no clue because the media, as I've said so many times, to the point of bursting, has failed you. It has failed you globally on the communication. Why would you think for 1 second that a global media, wherever the outlet is, whatever the format is, anywhere on our planet, could possibly tell the truth to a global public about just what is happening to the ability for us as a global society to be able to grow food for ourselves? If it couldn't tell you the truth on climate and environmental collapse, it is not going to tell you the truth on how bad things already are on the global events which continue to rob the public and rob communities at every single level of their ability to be able to feed themselves. Redistribution of food, we haven't seen the like of the sort of collapse of which we are continuing to see. Indeed, bringing those vital words, tipping points, which are continuing, as I said, to redefine every single element of which we find ourselves in. If the media on a global stage world platform had had any integrity, it would have already instigated the sound bites and the sound warnings and the wordings that were needed in order to bring not just the global public aware of how food production is going to be decimated in the coming days, weeks, months, and years ahead. It would have actually brought a crystal clear platform of evaluation to the table in order to explain to the public that because the climate and environmental emergency has been allowed to fester like a gaping wound, that the fact of how we are able to grow food in any given country, within any given local or national community level, has now been severely compromised within all abilities to be able to bring us safeguarding. A word that I use very loosely, I'm sorry to have to tell you, because that safeguarding is virtually non-existent in the state of play of how food production is hanging in there by a thread in the way things truly are, the cold, hard reality of the situation when it comes to talking about food production. Now, to my mind, food production now needs not just to be redefined, but it has to be taken deadly seriously, and there has to be brand new, ideally ideologies of mindset that are equipped to understand what is now needed within all concepts of redefining not just the nurturing and the planting of crops and products. Oh no, that is a mere particle of the system. We need to be able to have blanket coverage indeed of what I call safeguarding ecological food distribution processes across our planet, which take on board the differentiation of climate and temperature systems and changes within those systems in order to bring a blanket coverage of indeed not just crop rotation, but crop nurturing and encouragement under the most harshest of conditions, of which have totally changed the face of how all foods are grown and how all harvests will be harvested across our planet. This is fundamental change, the like of which we as human beings in our modern societies have simply not had to cope with or see ever. I do believe that the future in the nurture, growth, and sustainment of food production can be a very blooming and beneficial one if it is done in the right way, with the right impacts, and indeed with the right sustainable mindsets, understanding and to take the processes seriously enough of realizing just what is at stake here. What is at stake is everything. We start having, and we already are seeing it, massive ecological and food imbalances, not just of growth, but sustainability and production across our planet. It is not just what I call within certain geographical situations of certain countries when it comes to the collapse of growth patterns of food. But indeed, it is without doubt now something that must be taken on board on a geographical scale, the like of which has not had to be taken on board before by all countries and all operational abilities to grow food with sustainability at the very heart of the most harsh and changed climatic systems that the human species has ever had to endure. Having said that, I have a lot more to say, but I do want to hand the microphone as Oliver's been patient. Oliver, the microphone is yours, my friend. What would you like to share with us?
No, thanks, Robert. Just it's curious that we're rolling around food production, coral collapse, solar punk, alternative ways of looking at the world in, say, 100 years' time. I think probably from within 100 years' time. All of these different subjects are fascinating, and it's I mean, the question I keep asking myself is, can we carry on the way things are now and just hope for the best all the time? Can we really carry on like that? I mean, the politicians are not going to change. We know that. Or when they do, it will be well too late, and there would have been no real some preparation. Sure, sure there'll be solar, there'll be wind, there'll be tidal spring, there'll be I could name a few more. I mean, even biodiesel, for God's sake. But the whole thing will be a shitscape, really. It will be absolutely massive when that point happens. And should we perhaps, in our limited capacity, be exploring the preparedness for that time that is coming? That there's not much we can do as the collective of individuals that we are, but we can certainly, by talking about it, we can actually prepare certain ideas and get them a little bit more sort of shipshape. It really is like, I mean, if your ship catches fire, you have two options. You either put the fire out really fast, which is obviously not happening. We're not doing that as a planet. We're not putting out that fire. Or you bail out. Now, I don't mean the sort of Musk type of idiocy, of taking off in rockets somewhere. It's just ridiculous. But I mean, you either bail out of that method of living, that method of being stuck in that way, trying to save, while all the time it falls apart. So you're wasting all your resources on trying to save something that is, I'm not going to say doomed, but something that is collapsing, basically. Or you start to prepare another way of dealing with the problem. Not entirely, obviously. You don't just suddenly switch from one to the other. That's not going to happen anyway. People aren't going to do it. The reason that people are stuck in gasoline cars is they hate change. They just, and they're lazy. They hate change and they're lazy. Change, lazy, change, lazy. It's, it goes together so perfectly. So what do we do in the meantime is prepare. It's as simple as that. We start making preparations for saving stuff, corals, for food production, new methods of cultivation and protecting what we have, making sure it has all the needs that it has, water mostly, enough air, not being flooded all the time, stuff like that. We get people psychologically ready. I mean, really, for a big change in the whole global structure. That's what we're doing here. I feel a lot of the time, we're getting much more geared up towards coping with disasters, with changing technology, with being, if you like, able to cope with the psychological impacts without freaking out all the time. We seem to be getting much more mature about that. So it strikes me anyway. So if we can do all of those things and at the same time keep going, as it were, then I think we'll have a good chance of making a better world for ourselves and everybody else too, particularly for the kids and the kids and the kids. Now, with the fauna and flora, I really do think I'm really coming down much more firmly on the idea of large wildlife corridors, really. I mean, I just think that's probably the best bet, that are seriously managed by humans. You know, that this is a whole job creation. We know, we've seen it talked about in Ministry for the Future and various other books, and in reality too. Sometimes getting animals so they can go under or over roads and railways and so on. But the idea of losing all the fauna and flora is just horrific and abhorrent to me, and it's unnecessary too. As humans, we can steward much better than we do, and we're doing pretty well. A lot of people are doing pretty well, but it's a very small minority of people doing that work. If more people were doing it, there would be more enthusiasm for doing it. All of these things take money. All of these things take political influence. So you've got in America you've just got the wrong people in power, obviously, for this type of thing. But they won't be there forever. So the new people are coming out, and the new people are coming up. They're getting fired up by the ideas of our ecological future, of our of climate change itself. So I think we can definitely see progress going to come through. And likewise, once this burden that we've all been given of the kind of authoritarian nonsense governments, not just in the US, but around the world too, once they have been cast aside, then there will be a much greater appetite for getting involved in planetary boundaries, if you like, planetary repairs, just repairing stuff, getting it right, getting it so that we can actually look after our planet in a much more thorough way, in a much more job orientated way. So yeah, I would see all of those things as being positive things to look out for. But we really must be prepared more for it. We can't wait for the crash to come, because there will be a crash eventually. But if we've prepared ourselves for it, then we can save quite a lot as well. I'm quite certain of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ollie. It's always good when Oliver's inspired. It's just something going on. It's looking like the No Kings protest is the largest protest in American history. We got Sandy dressed up as Melania Trump. She's running around upstate New York protesting. Dr. Hoops has his fuck Trump baseball hat on, looking good with a family in Topeka, Kansas. Terry was here outside of Chicago. She's in her protest. And it's all good. It's good to have David here. David, you talked about your new project. You didn't tell us why you were in Ireland. I am very curious. Are you moving to the Green Isle? Are you on holiday? Are you just bothering our Irish cousins? What's going on, David? You do have to unmute, my friend.
Unmuting the mic helps. Thank you. First of all, your question about preparedness, because that is a huge concept, and I do have some points to share on that. I think the most important reason it's turned out so far, I mean, I'm just beginning my stay in Ireland this time, is usually I'm here for environmental reasons. This time, I'm here for the new project, which we'll talk about later in a few days. But I think the most important reason I've been here so far is to actually taste Guinness properly served at a true pub that's in the local town here, by invitation of locals that have become friends of mine, as a not some tourist coming in, but as a member of the community. And the combination of the pub owner, the friends, and the Guineas, I perhaps had, and my wife and I both had a delightful experience and a wonderful evening. And I am absolutely amazed how different it tastes here, fresh from the tap, versus in the can in the States. It's two entirely different worlds. And I am now absolutely, in addition to normally choosing wine over beer, willing to treat Guinness as an entirely separate experience, for which I'm honored and delighted to taste that. So I want you to know I'll raise a glass to Ireland anytime and the hospitality. So now let's get on to preparedness for a minute. I do have a few things to say here, and I feel it's sharing. Back at the Mensa National Gathering at the Millennium 25 years ago, it's believed, I gave a presentation based upon the work that I'd been doing for 20 years on the Space Council about one of the ultimate catastrophes that could occur, which would be a major asteroid hitting the Earth, an extinction level event. And I presented a process by which, with a little bit of advance warning, the entire species of humans, all of us, could survive. And it involved some complexities and some technology that didn't exist yet. But it was of sufficient interest that the members of FEMA that were in the audience asked for a copy of the presentation later. Now, I since refined that presentation and have given it repeatedly in Europe and the United States for the last 25 years on the diaspora of human intelligence, bringing our intellect into space, recognizing that space provides us with unlimited resources to use, both for our own needs and for repairing the planet. Now, a very close friend of mine is David Castleman, and he is referred to it. He's a retired attorney. He considers himself a self-repairing attorney. He's a philanthropist. He created EcoFlix, which is now free to view, by the way. It's no longer behind a paywall. And that is totally dedicated to the planet, to all the animals and creatures on it. And 3 or 4 years ago, I did a 1-hour podcast with him in which I gave him my vision of the Earth, outer space, and how it all fits together for the long term, making this planet a garden planet with manufacturing in space, with resources coming from asteroids, and basically rebuilding this planet, because David Castleman has devoted his life to saving elephants. He's done sanctuaries in Cambodia. He's recently bought land and worked in areas around it in Botswana to now have a major elephant preserve and an environmental preserve. He is actually doing what he can. He has a lot of resources, but they're not unlimited. And he was both a member of our crops team. He's also a member of our new project, which seems about as far away from environmentalism as possible, unless you think in 100-year terms and millennium terms. Then you see it's very much about empowering people, saving and rebuilding the planet. Because as David's pointed out, and we're all aware, we're not talking about saving ourselves. The extinction level events occurring, the number of species being lost each year, is astronomically serious. This is perhaps the worst global extinction period probably since the dinosaur and the asteroid there, and we're doing it without an asteroid hitting us. So you ask, what can we do to be prepared? Well, I've been on disaster preparedness and emergency preparedness committees and groups in Laguna Beach, where I lived for over a quarter century. Actually got thanked by the mayor for some of the work I did, because we had fires and floods and risk of tsunamis and everything else. And the simple fact of the matter is California is known for earthquakes. Aside from being the fourth largest economy in the world, it's the land of shake and bake. And yet the number of people who actually carry a case of water in their car or have a go bag near the door, between 1 and 10%. In other words, we all know big quakes are coming. We all know there's wildfires. You know the devastation that's happened in Southern California recently. We know how to build homes that are fire resistant, yet we don't build them that way. So, in other words, what we do is start preparing for the obvious, which means we devote a tiny bit of our time and resources to training, to stockpiling. My wife's into hydroponics and aquaponics and growing food. Like microgreens, they have 40 times the nutritional density per ounce because you're growing from seeds without soil. You can grow under the right lighting that can be indoors in cold. Because if we have an AMOC shift, guess what, folks? It's in mini ice age time for all of us on the east coast of the United States and in Ireland. And, basically everything on each side of the Atlantic, north of the equator, changes to what it was. I mean, let's remember Washington crossed the Delaware because it was frozen, and that happened with just a minor change. So, what you do to be prepared is you learn how to do things like grow food. You learn how to have emergency preparedness kits. You know how to do first aid, CPR. In other words, you basically learn how to be self sufficient and able to help in your own community. And this is where, talking about the collapse of small communities in your town and your family, we have globalized with social media, but we've also lost the ability to know who our neighbor is next door. And that's why any community I've ever lived, I always make it a point to know the main neighbors, have emergency plans and agreements with them. And basically, you hope for the best, because I'm an eternal optimist, but you prepare for the worst. So I have had to evacuate from fires and floods. I have actually had my former spouse's car be pushed off in a mudslide without in it, thank goodness, over and declared as a total loss. I mean, I have seen these things. I've watched the mile-long ring of fire come across the mountain in Laguna Beach while I was there. It inspired me to start creating wireless, solar-powered camera systems and deploy them on mountaintops to help. I was one of the early inventors of the Firewatch camera system. So you respond to the threats by learning about it. You respond to the threats about preparing for it. And we have to recognize that some of this is completely beyond our control. If we have a super volcano eruption, things are going to be dark for 5 years. I don't know anyone that has a 5-year supply of food and stuff to keep warm. But if we consider that a super volcano maybe only goes off every 30,000 to 300,000 years, we could focus more on what's going on now and what we can do to be prepared for this. And the fact that if there is a food shortage, there will be social unrest, which is a very polite way of saying others will try to steal your food at any cost, including your life. So, self defense is part of this. And that's why, if we're concerned about worst case things, you can't actually blame the preppers and the ones who are, waving guns and, putting on vests and, building shacks in the forest. Uh, they're basically don't know how to solve the problem. So they're ready to bunker in. And we joke about the bunker mentality, but most of us don't have, Zuckerberg's ability to build a 3-story underground bunker in Hawaii and have the means to fly there. So you take normal precautions, but of course it gets back to the ounce of prevention is an ounce of cure. I'm sorry, a gram of a kilogram. Anyway, I'll do metric at the moment, but you guys get the idea. Anyway, what is it? A penny saved is earned, but what do you do with euros? Anyway. Final thing, though, is that you have to live each day, but do the little things you can to give yourself some peace of mind and try to find like-spirited people like all of us here who actually have a long-term view. We take short-term action as best we can, The old thing about think globally and act locally. Well, I would say think locally and act globally because we have the means to do it. And I'm certainly doing my bit to try to make it possible for all of us to act globally. And you'll see what I mean about that in a week. So thank you for listening. Done with jokes, done with puns. Alex, I'm giving you a break. You've only cracked one pun today.
Yeah, hallelujah. It's really good to hear your voice, David. I'm really glad to hear from you. And yeah, I'm in my cabin in the woods. I haven't left the woods since July. I got enough fishing equipment to last a lifetime. We've got vitamin C on the inside of the bark of the pine trees. Yeah, I could easily survive 5 years here. Fishing, we got firewood all over the place. I'm definitely good for 5 years in the dark. Yeah, your phone is definitely buzzing out. Can't hear a thing you're saying, David.
Oh, I said you don't have Guinness, so I don't know how you can survive 5 years.
Yeah, I've survived 17 years without a drink. So somehow, and that surviving the 17 years without a drink has given me so much strength for this fight. I'm always convinced that it's easier to deal with environmental struggles than to deal with alcoholism. And
you just need solar. You just need to get a solar array, Alex. That's all you need. If you've got your solar, then you're set up.
yeah,
That's all you need. You have to get the solar.
I'm getting there. If I was younger, Ollie, I would have already built it out
You
back.
don't.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You mustn't put it on the roof, though. You mustn't put it on the roof, of course, because it snows quite a lot with you, doesn't it? And then you'll be taking off a foot of snow.
They all tell me not to put it on the roof. I'm so tempted.
Don't put it on the roof. You may not be allowed to anyway.
Yeah. Well, I could.
You're conservation
Here. This
you're
is
probably conservation. You're probably a conservation.
Oh no, we've carefully avoided that. We're not part of any conservation.
Oh, clever.
No.
Oh,
yeah, very deliberately we've avoided.
Best bet is 20 feet away from the house. Separate stand. Put something underneath it that you don't want snow on.
Yeah, that's what they tell me. I'm still tempted just to do the bourgeois thing and throw them on the south roof here. But we got to get the kids through college, one thing at a time. And looking at Jim, who so often is discussing global food systems and ways of making global food systems efficient, I constantly notice they say 30% of fossil fuels are used for food. And that's 2% for aviation, 6% for concrete and flares, but 30%, just in logic, that's really a major block where a 10% reduction would be gigantic. So always good, Jim, to hear from you. What's going on?
Yeah, just first a comment on preparedness. I saw a story maybe a year or two ago discussing how Bangladesh has become much better prepared for flooding since the famous 1970 relief effort. But I don't remember all the details. But the one thing I do remember was that they have, in terms of poultry, they have shifted from raising chickens to raising ducks. Ducks float, chickens don't. But what I was going to bring up is the question of the future food system, and are there new sources of food, and so my mind goes to George Monbiot's book and associated videos dealing with really what he calls post-agricultural sources of food, and Yeah, I think these deserve serious consideration, and there's the company in, I think, is it Helsinki, Solar Foods, that produces their protein-rich powder called Solian or something like that. That comes from it. Its energy is not from the sun, it isn't from photosynthesis, which is the basis of most of the world's food chains, but rather they they identified a bacteria that is found in soil that that gets its energy by oxidizing hydrogen, and so that company in Finland, they devised a bioreactor where you where you feed in hydrogen and other gases. I forget what all needs oxygen, CO2, and you need to supply nitrogen, which they supply by adding ammonia and some mineral salts as well, and 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 without any other inputs, they can culture this bacteria that gets its energy from hydrogen. And I've seen the analysis that really pegs this as the most land efficient way of producing protein possible, and it's the previous record was held by soy crops, and this is maybe like 7 times as land efficient as soy for producing protein. So I think we need to seriously consider these new possibilities. But one thing that occurs to me, that if I were this company or other researchers, uh, I would look at the possibility of whether that hydrogen, they call them canal gas bacteria, because canal gas is I think it's a German slang word for hydrogen. I think it means bang gas. um, but anyway, I would consider, can we take this canal gas bacteria and again cultivate it, through supplying it with hydrogen, etc., but not for the purpose of making it into end user human food or food for humans, but rather seeing if we can establish a food chain based on it. It's a bacteria that lives in the soil along with a lot of other, more normal bacteria that get their energy from exudates um, from plant roots. You've probably heard Ed talking about soil food chains, and basically the basis of of microbial life in soils is basically plant roots secreting what's called exudates that are rich in sugars, and that's where the energy comes that comes from, that the bacteria and the fungi uh, grow on, and there's a whole food chain starting from that I can't remember all the details, but I think basically bacteria are eaten by protozoa, and maybe microarthropods may feed on protozoa, and macroarthropods feed on microarthropods, and uh, but I might not have the details exactly right. But my question is, instead of turning that canal gas bacteria into some protein powder that people may or may not accept, can we grow an entire food chain up to macroarthropods that chickens will eat? And that might be one of the most land efficient ways of getting proteins for chickens to live off of, and so anyways, that I think that's interesting, and it seems kind of, I don't know if this is naive or obvious or what, but if you take a piece of dirt, of land, soil, and at one end of it you feed in hydrogen and these other minerals, ammonia, etc., that the canal gas bacteria feed on, and maybe little by little you take away the sun and the plants that are providing those exudates that are fueling the entire food chain. Can you establish a food chain that no longer depends upon the sun coming in and plants secreting sugars from their roots? And it seems like an easy enough experiment to do. Maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't, but can you get a food chain that starts with those canal gas bacteria, and which are eaten by protozoa that are eaten by this and that all the way up to the point of having chicken feed? So anyways, that's sort of my passing thought, but anyways, in a larger context, I think everything George Monbiot's talks about needs to be taken seriously. He's kind of one of my go-to inspirations. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Just say,
Yeah.
Jim, just say to you that you also triggered me there on Bangladesh, which is, for people who don't know, who should know, is the world's largest delta. And what triggered me was you talking about how they cope now with floods. However, the problem that they may have to face in coming years is how they cope with no flood at all whatsoever. Very little river water. What water comes flying down the Ganges and the Brahmaputra rivers will most likely be snapped up in other parts in India and Pakistan and so on before it gets anywhere near Bangladesh. So they may, all the work that they've done to stop the flooding, which is extraordinary, the amount of land processes that they've done to stop it, that may all be for nothing if well, it's going to take a few hundred years, I'm sure, but even so, if they're not getting the water anymore because the what do you call it, what are they called, the icy things that come down mountains?
Glaciers.
Glaciers, because the glaciers have basically flowed out their last melt. What are they going to do then? Stuff like that. That's anomalies of the future that we don't have to deal with, but kids coming are going to have to deal with that sort of shit. What are they going to do?
You're not joking about the large delta over there in Bangladesh. I was looking at thinking it's the size of Massachusetts. It's 4 times bigger than Massachusetts, the whole state.
Yeah.
It's good to hear, David. And we've been discussing Hoti's and Dr. Mann's new book, Science Under Siege, not science fiction under siege, science under siege. And to toot my horn, I got an acknowledgement in that book. So very happy.
Congratulations, by the way, about that, Alex. That's amazing.
Isn't it amazing? I don't really do anything. I just get on social media and have a lot of fun with you guys. I really am not contributing significantly. But Mann did tell me last week to focus on problems and solutions. So I read the entry on problem solving very carefully in the Wikipedia. And Jim is talking about food solutions. These are technologically feasible ideas, ways to engineer food with a much lower energy footprint, and they're realistic. And then we hear of the problems of this world, that governments, corporations, et cetera, large organizations aren't, aren't approaching, but they could approach. And we can see the problems, we can see the solutions, and we can see nothing much happening. And here we are. As I've been saying, I talked to the American Marxists all week. Robert and I really quite enjoyed talking to Bobby Digital, and introducing him to the environmental world, building the alliance. I'm getting communication here from Sandy, so she's doing well in her No Kings protest. But my point about the socialists is they suffer in their world for workers' rights, and they don't see themselves making any progress. Listening to Bobby and friends, the purple people, they're called, they just sounded some of that doomer and hopelessness and despair, that they weren't getting the results they're looking for. The workers just don't seem to be improving. Their lot isn't improving the way these American Marxists would like it. And American Marxists in particular seem kind of hopeless. They're not making much impact. We're not hearing about them on MSNBC and CNN. Like everything we say about climate change and the environmental polycrisis, these American Marxists could say the same thing. I'm not outright, approving or disapproving of them. I'm just saying Bobby Digital is a good guy. I like talking to him. He likes hearing about the green business. It's just where my travels have taken me lately. And so where we keep working, waiting for those results. I always love David's optimism and his vibe. I have some of that too. The life of the party thing. We're just gonna be the life of the party. Get this green party going. Get these environmental rights. I said this morning, Lily, the corporations in America have had legal personhood since the 19th century. And that's always seemed kind of strange to me that a corporation in court is treated exactly the same as a living human. But with that said, okay, it sets up the precedent for rivers and lakes and mountains and forests to be given legal personhood in court. It makes a lot more sense to me. A lake gets personhood than a corporation, just straight off the bat. So, but the corporation already has a personhood. It's really easy to get the lake to personhood legally. A couple sympathetic judges, a couple senators who, feel some vibe, some advantage for themselves, and bam, we get the Salt Lake gets to be sued in court. David, the beat simply goes on. We do listen to the stonemason. He tells us to just keep nudging. You get that when you're building your pyramid, you get that stone in place, and it better be in the right place. There's no second tries with your 20-ton stone. You get it in place. You're confident it's in the right place, all lined up. You move on to the next stone. Oliver's philosophy of life has infected all of us. So the beat does just go on here. What else is happening?
But Alex,
Yeah.
Alex, you get a second chance too. You do get a second chance. No, you do. You really do. You can build an entire building and get to the last bit being put on, and you suddenly realise you were 10 centimeters, whatever, let's say 3 inches, whatever, short of 3 or 4 inches short, and you were unable to put in those final elements, and you have a crisis for about 10 minutes, and then you have to work out that there is something you can do. You can remove part of the material that is causing the obstruction, literally, and get away with a trompe-l'oeil, if you like, from left to right, and actually overcome the problem. So you do have a get-out clause occasionally. You can bodge it. You can do a good bodge. And we need to do a good bodge now on the world. We need to do that good bodge.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I'm telling you that David's good cheer is a climate solution. I'm hearing it in people's voices, the familiar voice of David coming back to us with his, well, the puns might not be a climate solution, but his good cheer, good attitude really is a climate solution. What, David, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Is the signal clear, or am I distorted at the moment?
A little of both.
Check your mic.
Carry on.
Yeah, well, I'm using my smartphone and I'm using internet that is probably shared with 5 children right now, some of them doing lessons. So I apologize for being less than clear. You know, that plus the puns plus the stuff. Hey, I was thinking what you were talking about regarding corporations and um, you know, basically plants, animals, rivers speaking for themselves. That's exactly what Carl has been pushing. He's been a member of both our environmental team and our new project, and that's Carl Schroeder up in Toronto, in Canada, and not California, but Canada. And he's working the Diadis concept, the digital twin, for a long time, and has written books on it and everything else about empowering legal rights and using AI or models to speak from the point of view of that. And also, corporations are allowed to have assets and buy and sell things. Imagine if a river could charge for its use and then collect the money and then spend it in its own defense. And that is part of the thing of mixing economic systems, whether it be capitalistic, socialistic, whatever. But once you empower it, it's allowed to not just speak for itself, but retain and manipulate assets. And imagine if a mountain could declare itself an entity and could collect money for its use and spend money to protect itself and collaborate with other mountains. So I think we're closer to this than might be imagined. Right now, we're in, as Michael Rose says, a series of emperorships and empires, and we'll see if that can be tamed in the next decade or two to be back towards a little bit more people oriented than king oriented. That's where no kings, obviously. Although when I play bridge and when I play with cards, I appreciate having the kings, but there's always the ace above that. So I think we need to ace our way into this problem and not make aces of ourselves in the process.
Well, the man
And that's
can.
my,
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah.
He's
So
got
anyway,
started again.
I think David's phone has an issue like some do when another mic is open up on the panel here. I do appreciate David's viewpoint because, you know, my artist sentiment shares much in common with his imagination. I think a fictional imagination is has always been a human response to crisis and problems. To take a break and watch the movie, read the novel, get away from it a little bit. Certainly for me, listening to the loud rock and roll, and David and I love our science fiction. We did interview Carl Schroeder last January 22nd, David and I. The most enjoyable experience. Carl, that David was talking about, sci-fi writer in Canada there. Our community is very, very large, and we're the regulars. We show up every week, you know, touch base, keep the club open. But our community really is very, very large, and a lot of people out there. And it's important to remember how many of those people are out there that we don't hear from regularly. But they're part of us. From Vidal actually making a climate crisis club T-shirt, Vidal making great T-shirts in Brazil, and I think of Moses so often in Western Uganda, teaching people English and having a cell phone and living his life. But we hear from everyone around the world and the different mindsets, not just climate activists, hardcore, you know, with the politics, economics, journalism, but so many different types. Ollie,
Did you hear with your idea and David's detail about the river?
yeah,
having identity and status, and the mountain. And he was just about to say, and then there were waves of technology that got in the way and distorted it. I know he was just about to say, and then there's the ocean. The ocean, the whole ocean, the oceans of the entire world. Imagine if they had identity and status of their own. What could be achieved?
Yeah, Oliver, it also made me think of, a book I just completed last week that is A River Alive? And, they talk a lot about several countries that have instituted like amendments to their constitution declaring the rights of rivers and the rights of trees, just various physical, geographical entities that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just can you imagine if the oceans, you see, who owns the oceans, for goodness sake? I mean, how dare you? We are land creatures primarily. How dare you assume you can just go out to the oceans and plunder it, just in every capacity until it's almost not dead, but nearly dead, dying from over extraction. Who is it to you? You're a land creature. So if the ocean had that same status, that same quality of identity, the ocean could kill all of us in a day, couldn't it? So easily. Yeah. Sorry, I get a bit carried away sometimes.
No, that's great, Oliver. I do like this idea about nature having rights, but I am a bit iffy on it in terms of equating those rights with some form of economy, or that you could charge something for it, because I think we want to move away from that as a value system, because that's a big part of our problem right now, is that worth is measured in terms of economics.
You're certainly right.
Yeah.
The whole ownership question itself is suspect. Owning the ocean, owning this, it always seems to me like a Latin Roman hustle. So the rich landowners could keep all their stuff. But perhaps I like assigning assignments and homework and jobs to other people. And I keep mentioning Bobby Digital and these Marxist Americans. I'm perfectly happy to let Bobby and crew figure out what ownership means, so I don't have to do it. But certainly the legal, if a corporation in America, corporations have had legal personhood for something like 140 years, it's an easy legal step to mountains and forests and rivers. I'm glad David is back with us, and I remember the old feeling of not really being sure that his next comment is going to be helpful, but most likely it'll be very entertaining. What else, David, is going on?
Well, first of all, real quick, you mentioned about open mic. Robert, could you try closing and muting your mic, which you normally leave open, and let's see if that makes a difference in the clarity of my signal coming through.
Yeah, I'm just opening them, closing the mic now for you, David, see if it makes any difference.
Yeah, it may or may not. Is it any clearer for people listening right now? Does it make a difference?
Yes.
It's definitely the open mic wrecks your audio for like 5 seconds. Somebody else opens the mic.
Okay, great. Well, then if you can keep the mic closed, then I'll talk real quick. First of all, I'm not in favor of any particular economic system, but I think the point that is made by some is that if dollars or bitcoins represent control or protection, then you'd want to equal rights to whatever we do. If we're making the ocean, now, by the way, Oliver brought up a really important point about the ocean, but I think you really need to look upon the ocean as the air below the surface level. Right now, we don't claim ownership of the air. It's a resource, but it's the things that exist and breathe the air that are the entities. So when you turn things upside down, like they beautifully in the various series, with the Buccaneers, and I can't help but think of Captain Jack. The idea is that you don't think about the ocean; you think about all creatures and things in it. There are underwater rivers and mountains. There are whales. There are porpoises or porpoisei. There's diatoms. In other words, you don't measure it as to the ocean, but rather all the living things in it and all the features in it, the mountains and the canyons. And I'm saying that it's not about the water any more than it is about the air. It's about what the creatures are. Whales provide whalefall to the bottom of the ocean that feeds things down there. I think we probably want to give precedence, first of all, to the sentient, intelligent creatures like whales, and then work your way down to the point where you're taking into consideration and allowing the voice of the things, the benthic life at the bottom of the ocean. So if you suddenly think of the ocean as a carrier of a whole planet that's 72% of this Earth, as opposed to the 28% on the surface that breathe the air, these are the animals that breathe the ocean and the creatures that live in that atmosphere. I mean, we have percentage humidity that goes up to 100%. Their humidity is always 100%. So that's just an interesting way to look at it, I think.
Thanks, David. The humidity of the ocean creatures. You certainly seem to have increased your environmental awareness since we last spoke, which is a good thing, and something we talk about around here. We have been discussing a lot deep green ecology, the people who really feel nature and almost don't think humans are important, all the way to the other side of climate activism and environmental activism, which Robert here has really been holding that end up strongly recently. Hi, Robert.
Yeah, hi, Alex. Thanks again for the microphone. Indeed, I do want to say that David absolutely spot on with the pulse of the grasp of understanding what the analogies that are needed. I think on a public-wide scale. Many of us need to connect here. I'm not speaking about us in the room. I think I'm speaking about everybody outside the room, the public, if you will, that we are trying to bring our message to as wide a circle, or should I say, as wide a geographical compass, which makes a lot more sense with the words across a global basis. I'm thinking actually about. The situation of if I can put this into the terms I want to find for what I'm about to talk about here, we talk about indeed what David just mentioned about ownership. And I know Oliver mentioned a bit about that as well. Ownership, indeed. It's one of the great travesties of what I call mixed ideologies of so many people within the power regime have got fundamentally twisted within the principles of how they actually operate their systems for the worse of us, the human species, the people, the public of our planet. This is one of the great ills, continues to be. This business called ownership, the fact that we can actually certain, or should I say, a certain amount of individuals on our planet that wield power for all the wrong reasons, bringing the wrong decisions, the wrong policies, the wrong ideologies, the wrong mentality, the wrong thinking to change what we are trying to change. I'm talking about this business, this word called ownership, and how it fits into the social structures of our societies so badly. Ownership indeed has no right to have any bearing, and it should not be measured within a great many ecological, environmental, and indeed other situations across our planet. Those that have persisted to compartmentalize ownership, if I can put it like that. There are individuals that wield the influence and the power to make life affirming and life changing situations on the grandest of scales to the public that are indoctrinated not just by the greed mantra that is changing, as has indeed changed, is the word I want, for the wrong reasons. Their grasp and what should be ownership and what should not be ownership. I will say under no uncertain terms that those individuals that persist, and we know that there are many of them across our societies, indeed, that are involved in the principal and key decision making within our systems. It's those individuals that have indeed. Tim, you might want to switch your microphone. I can hear your dishes in the background. Thanks, Kim. Sorry, I just thought I'd better mention that. Those indeed, if I can get my point, what I'm trying to think, sidetrack my mind there. The fact that those individuals in key positions within our systems who have taken it on board over the decades to decide that ecological systems that are of the greatest importance to the heartbeat of us as human beings and individuals, these ecological systems have been deemed to be decided by individuals that have no collective right to decide, indeed, what has already been mentioned, no collective right to decide whether an ocean should be economically viable or not, whether a river should be economically viable or not, whether a stream or even a tributary from that stream should be economically viable or not. You see, another one of the great ills that's been self-imposed by those that are wielding the power of deciding structural policy within our systems is this. They have decided that with the help of economists, economics, and balance sheets, what is and what will be and what won't be decided within the ecological framework of the heartbeat of our planet's extremities. All these things have been compartmentalized into economically viable situations. That is and continues to be. While that mental ideology persists of seeing ecological systems and persists in seeing the very structures of our planet and all the things that go within our planet's heartbeat, while that persists as being seen as nothing more than an economics exercise, that will continue to be fatally flawed thinking on the part of what I call progress, with opening up mindset. Yeah, Dale, you want to say something? So I'll let
Yeah, I just wanted to say something while you were on the topic of economic
yeah.
language, and you know, I shot my hand up when Kim mentioned, you know, and you know, she made a good point about, you know, be wary of the tendency for us to see, you know, so many things in terms of money. On the other hand, you know, in ecological economics and donut economics, you know, in these particular, you know, ways of looking at economics from the viewpoint of, you know, what does it cost us, you know, ultimately, you know, what are the real costs? You know, that's what ecological economics asks us to do, is to say, you know, all of the cost, you know, especially including you know, the things that, you know, classical economics wants to deem as external cost. And what they mean by external in practice is that these are costs that we don't want to have anything to do with, and so we push them off on sacrifice zones, usually meaning, you know, areas where there's, you know, non-powerful people, mostly poor people, that we don't have to deal with because we're running our machine, and damn whoever gets in our way with it. Those are external costs. We don't, so we're not concerned with those. And so, the same thing with the cost, the economic manipulation, and I say manipulation in a positive sense. The ways of incentivizing society to fly right. In other words, incentivize, tax tax things that you want to de-incentivize, and subsidize things that you want to encourage, and do that with a view to the overall cost, and when you come right down to it, what helps the common good, not only humanity, but all of that humanity depends on, which is the earth and the ecosystem. All of those things have to be, taken into account. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Dale. I thank you for coming to the microphone and sharing that because it is so relevant. Your words are absolutely spot on with the observation of what needs to be understood by many, needs to be understood by those that are principally within the structure of policy and decision making, because these are the people that I continue to, if I can put it like this, pull apart because of their faulty thinking at every single level. When people, indeed, within power and structure units, of which they undoubtedly do, within our faulty structures, within our communities, our geographical communities, indeed, those that persist in, indeed, what was mentioned, speaking about an ocean as a mere commodity, a mere vessel for understanding, or a mere vessel for deciding whether an ocean can be financially or economically viable or not. Totally flawed, fatalistic ideology of thinking that is continuing to bring, indeed, thinking that should be, with a capital T, to its very knees across our planet. Does not have to be like that. You should never be thinking of an ocean or a river as merely an economic vessel in order to either plunder or decide how much you can sell by the consecutive particle of it, just to appease yet more people within a power structure that has absolutely nothing to do with environmental or ecological credentials at any level whatsoever. So, indeed, I talk about the oceans, I talk about the rivers, and what is decided and not decided by power structures with ideologies which to persist to be fatally flawed. There's so much across the systems and the spheres of our systems that are fatally flawed and continue to be. These things need to be openly discussed at length, out in the open, by not just hundreds of thousands, but tens and tens and tens and tens, and indeed millions of people. Because unless geographically across our planet from country to country, the people, not just the ordinary working people, but people on indeed a geographical scale across our planet finally understand, and indeed those within these power systems are forced to understand the fatality of their reasonings. We're talking about reasonings here that have no semblance of dexterous level of not just mental maturity, but mental comprehension for the right ecological and indeed environmental practice safeguarding that should be implemented as a rite of passage that should be normal thinking. But this is one of the infections across our society, that those within our entire systems and our power structures, they do not think with what we would deem or want to call conducting themselves with normal thought. In fact, far from it. These thoughts, as I said, are indeed governed only to the balance sheet, governed only to financial gain of the quickest measure over the shortest possible period, things that are indeed guiding and walking us as a collective society across to the oblivion path, and very quickly, unless we change these fatal ideologies of thought that persist within our governments, within our politics, within our economic systems. I've touched along these lines many, many times, and I doubtless continue to do so because it always crops up in the conversation. This is why the whole ecological heartbeat of our planet is being plundered, because those that indeed have been wielded, been given these abnormal and obscene amounts of power, and I do mean obscene, and they have been given the hand under no uncertain terms to do as much damage as they possibly can do. And this is another one of the reasons why this fatal reasoning, as I call it, on such a massive level, we have fatal reasoning, fatal, what I call fatal determining of mindsets, not just on a community level, but on a national level and a global level. We indeed, collectively as societies now, we have indeed a talent. If we don't put fascist maniacs as leaders within our respective governments, we put in political figures and figureheads that want to continue to drain and plunder our ecological treasures, our ecological and environmental, indeed, lifebloods, and our ecological systems for the quickest possible gain to die to extinction that they possibly can do. It's this faulty reasoning that I call, and I will continue to call out at every single level possible. And I know that anybody worth their salt will continue to do that. Because if we don't call out these gross and massive, monumental levels of disgusting manipulation of our environments, our ecological systems, and indeed the very heartbeat of our planet's ability to be able to live. If we don't call out those faulty decisions and say, you are not going to see an ocean as merely a financial meal ticket to yet more billions of dollars. You are not going to see our ecological systems, indeed our fields, indeed our forests, indeed, our landscapes as nothing more than a profit sheet with a blank check attached to it for the greater advancement of yet more massive corporate cancer. There are massive, fundamental questions that must continue to be asked. They must continue to be put under the spotlight. And those that continue to talk about this, like myself, must be given, indeed, a full global vocal platform, indeed, to get this message across to all within the system's ability to change all this vitally for the greater good of every single person, and crucially, for the greater good of saving what is left of our planet's structures and environments, while we still have the ability to do it. Because if we don't take heed, these fundamental, indeed crucial questions, and we don't hammer them hard, and we don't make absolutely every single effort possible to indeed bring that level of consciousness, then we are continuing to fail hands down. It's not about deep green ecology. It's not about going overboard with environmental, what I call, well, some people would say, fanaticism. It is far from it. It is about having a clear conscience to saving our planetary systems for the greater good and heartbeat of 8+ billion people to be able to live in sustainability and balance completely within every single community. It is about having the conscious heart and the consciousness and having a conscience within your own mind to realizing just how much damage is being done here. Damage that is being done on the most monumental of scales because it has been allowed to continue to be done for decades upon decades, because we have not had people like myself, or indeed if we have had voices like myself, they have not been on the most massive of scales. They've not been all encompassing in order to bring that structural and integral change that is absolutely necessary. There's no room for half measures when we are trying to remove very, very, very dangerously flawed, fatal ideologies that have absolutely no right to be wielding the sort of power that they do to deconstruct our environmental heartbeats, our ecological heartbeats within the planet's structures. No right at all. So it is, amongst many of the questions and indeed discussions we continue to have, absolutely vital that these indeed talking points, as I call them, of bringing structure, of bringing understanding, of bringing involvement, of bringing urgency, of bringing what I call a mental consciousness to what the emergencies are, because these emergencies are vast and they are joined. It is not just a couple of emergencies that have, to what I call many of the public's non-joined up understanding of environmental concerns or planetary and climate concerns. It is far more involving and far more infinite and far more joined up than that. It needs to be an understanding that every single one of these faulty systems is holding back vital ecological and environmental advancement for all of us. And that advancement cannot go ahead in the sort of states of what I call deep forward movement to the right measures, the right policies, the right thinking, and the right ideologies within these social structures that continue to fester like open wounds, that are absolutely dedicated and monumentally made sure of by so many that want to keep our floundering and indeed infected what I can only describe as I've said, fatally flawed ideologies from continuing to move us forward. It's a case here of not just forward thinking, but it's a case of joining up every dot, every ecological system, every planetary system, every bit of democratic and undemocratic intent, no matter what the level is. It's a case of joining the lot up for the greater good and having what I call the discussion of discussions about it. Because unless we have the intent to be able, to be bold, to be committed, to be what I call all-encompassingly forward-thinking enough, devoted, that we see it as a crusade, if you will, of mental intent to overcome the strangulation of these systems, which continues to persist to stop the advancement, indeed, of what we need and where we need to be with ecological, environmental, and indeed democratic responsibility for planetary safeguarding. We cannot make those measures of intent that we now need to in order to change the fabric of these systems. All of this is in play here. It's all relevant. And every single part of what is not working within our systems, as I've said too many times before, in very many different rooms and different vocal situations, has to be repurposed for change. We cannot continue to allow a global playing field that thinks that ecology and environmental matters is nothing more than a selling it by the pound mentality. Those and that and many of those systems are the fatally geared systems that have brought us into what we are in now. Having said that, we have hands. I know we need to get to Andrea and David. I shall hand you the microphone back, Alex. Thank you for that, brother. Thank you again. Whether we've got Alex, actually.
I'm sorry, I just wandered off to get a stray dog that escaped.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I
wondered where you were then for a minute.
No, I had to capture this dog. I'm babysit dog sitting today. The dog escaped. Important business. We do have what's going on, right? We have David and Andrea up here.
Yeah, I'm not sure which order we have. I think it was David and Andrea, but don't quote me on it because I'm not 100% sure. I think it was David.
I'll state that it was myself and request you mute your mic. I've got about a 3-minute summary and integration that I want to share based upon what I've heard from everyone who's spoken today, including myself. And I'd like to wind back for a minute. In the 60s and 70s, I was fortunate enough to hear some lectures from Andrew Golumbos, an interesting mix of science and sociology, which he called volitional science. And he tackled the concept of ownership in an interesting way. He basically said, we own our bodies and we own our thoughts, and everything else is resource. Now, remind everyone here that economics is really not about money. It's about allocation of resource. And Kim brought up very good points about not being tied to if we're going to personify or corporatize the entities out there, be it mountains, whales, whatever. It's really not about dollars. Use dollars as an example in order to fight those who use dollars to work against nature. So I'm going to rewind a bit here. When I was working with Scripps, I had the opportunity to meet with one of the top benthic scientists in the world, and she told me that her biggest concern about the crops concept was in putting things down to the bottom of the ocean to clean the atmosphere. What are the costs in the deep ocean? And she didn't mean costs like money. She meant like disruption of benthic life, changing of the environment, and so on. And while she fully understood that we're poisoning our atmosphere at a massive rate, she also understood that if you then just poison the ocean too, that doesn't necessarily work either. And I said, of course, that's why, unlike others who are profit motivated, we were looking at trials and tests to see what could be safely done to make things better up here without making it worse down there, since the bottom of the ocean is the natural location where all the carbon ends up in a million years anyway. But without shifting to the particular project I was working on, here's the point I want to make, is that there are costs to everything human civilization does because we are master disruptors of things. We're like termites on steroids. Ants may tunnel from Italy to Spain, but termites and their mounds are everywhere, and they're incredibly beautifully designed systems. But the termites put more methane in the air than all the cows, and all humans do. And the termites do that, and they've been doing it since before we existed. So their existence has a cost to the atmosphere. In the last 300 years, our move into industrialization has had a cost to the atmosphere by changing it, which then has a cost to the animals that go extinct, or eventually to ourselves as the CO2 levels go higher and we can't think straight. We're already halfway to the level of where we begin to feel foggy. If you get 1,000 parts per billion indoors, which happens, you feel the room is stuffy. Well, we're halfway there. We were a third of the way there when I was born. Now we're halfway there. So there are costs which can be measured in dollars, which can be measured by economic systems. So whether it's capitalism or socialism or communism, and please remember, we have neither socialism or capitalism at the moment. If you have capitalism that's based on fiat money that's decided by governments, which can then elect people that change the rules on how money is made and distributed, that's not capitalism. So don't anyone think we have capitalism right now, nor do we have socialism, we don't have communism. We do, however, have leaders who are manipulating and gaming the system to create the most resource going to them at the most cost to the rest of us, and more importantly, cost to future generations, our children and grandchildren. So the core issue, which is all illuminated by things Kim and Robert and Oliver and Alex and Dale have said, as well as myself, is that we have a snowballing situation where control of resource is being rather rapidly concentrated into a small number of people. Now, in capitalistic terms, wealth has been redistributed from a fairly level playing field to concentrated to where 1% of the people control 90% of the resource. And typically, the 1% controlling that are not concerned about the costs in health, in environment, in extinctions, in long term. And the core issue that has to be resolved over time is how to change the game and the playing field to make it level again. This all goes back to game theory. And believe it or not, game theory is going to be our solution in the long term. but this takes time. And what is really important in the short term is to recognize that the game right now is concentration of wealth in the few, and the few use coercion, both mental and physical. We can call it brainwashing, we can call it indoctrination. But the key thing is, at the current situation, we have moved in the last 50 years towards a concentration of wealth and a concentration of power. And that power is using manipulation and coercion and control of information. The internet originally helped bring down the Iron Curtain, helped end the Cold War. The internet is now no longer a tool of free and fair flow of information. So, I mean, consider the Great Wall of China, Firewall of China. So, my summary's gone a little bit long, but the bottom line is we're talking about a situation right now that is high risk for the future of mankind, high risk for many, many species, but there are solutions to it if we think long term and re-level the playing field, which then redistributes power, redistributes wealth, and allows for fair handling of costs, including environmentalism, health of species, and so on. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time and a little bit of cleverness on the part of people that care and have a heart, competing against people who don't care and don't have a heart. And that's the important thing, is to stay focused on the long term. Optimism is a tremendous tool for success. Be patient and stay with it and never give up.
Sounds like you're in the parents club there, David. Good stuff. Good to hear from you. Really is. And it is snowballing. Again, I've referenced several times today how I've spent the week talking to the American communists, and it's so funny to hear their desperation and how they're not getting anywhere. And I think of environmentalists who talk about how they're not getting anywhere. Andrea, I'm glad to see you're here as well. It's we are a climate solution. How are you, Andrea? What's going on?
I'm good. It's coming up to 3:30 in the morning. I thought I'd say hi. I've been listening. Don't worry. Just felt like being a bit quiet tonight. But I always like to say hi and just see how everyone's doing. I've been listening to the talk about the tipping points, and one of the things I'm very aware of, we're all at different stages of acceptance on what part of the journey we're on. From a future perspective. So, Ollie, you were talking about 2050, the end of the century, all that sort of stuff. And we obviously saw, and I know, Kim, you've been posting a fair bit about coral reefs. So we've lost the coral reefs officially now, and I've been saying for ages we've already lost the coral reefs. And the media has been really interesting the way it's responded to it. First of all, it should have been the biggest story in the world. But secondly, it's always talking about the human impact, like the economic impact, if you're behind a coral reef on land, you're pretty much screwed from a floods perspective, sea rise perspective. But to me, it's like it's so much bigger than that. I mean, there's 25% of the ocean life in the ocean depends on the coral reefs. The entire ocean ecosystem relies on the coral reefs. So to me, it's something I've always known was coming, but now that it's here, like if we could really get our heads around what this means, and there's obviously 5 other things on the list of tipping points that haven't passed yet. Antarctica, which we know a lot about Antarctica, but we don't know everything about Antarctica because it's just impossible for the scientists to get everywhere. So is the Doomsday Glacier going to snap off? All that sort of stuff. The Greenland Glacier, we know we can see that. There's much more evidence around that. There's much more scientists able to get to it. The Amazon rainforest die-off is going to start at 1.5 degrees, and they're talking 2050, 2100. I'm like, we're already at 1.5 degrees. What the fuck are they talking about? Then I think there was AMOC, which will send the entire northern hemisphere into a deep freeze. But in this part of the world, from my understanding, is that it's just going to get extremely hot. It's already hot here, as we all know, but it's going to get even hotter. I'm kind of hoping that it will, if the entire northern hemisphere freezes, it's going to start reflecting more sunlight back out into the atmosphere. So maybe those of us in the global south will be the ones that survive. But I haven't heard any scientists talk about it. I'm still trying to find an answer to that question. But the coral reefs, that's already enough. You know, it's like sorry, if life in the ocean dies, we're all fucked. And I'm seeing the scientists talking about it, and the journalists always, if we can reduce emissions, we can potentially stop this this event happening in Antarctica. I mean, but we've already lost the coral reefs. Like, what the fuck are you guys all going on about? Why? And the scientists don't know how to talk about it, and nobody wants to talk about it. This is what, to me, it's the grimmest news when it comes to the climate. It's the grimmest news we've ever had. And I wrote about it in the Weekend Reads. I just like, it's such an interesting, like, on the show yesterday, the guys that I do it with, they were criticizing the scientists for not speaking more honestly, and I'm like, no, it's not. No, they're speaking honestly. We don't want to face this stuff, and I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, it's just, yeah. To me, this is the biggest news this century. You know, it's like,
I agree. It's really hard to face. It's really hard to talk about. And I think it takes time to get your brain wrapped around what that means.
yeah. So maybe because my brain was already wrapped around it, right? Because, you know, just watching the coral die-offs in the last sort of few
It's
years,
baked
right?
in, Andrea. You're baked in already.
No, it is, but it is baked. But it's also baked in.
You're baked
Yeah,
in. You're
I'm baked in, but it's baked in. But like, you know, you kind of think about this. What does that mean? You know, what does it really mean? So, you know, you could obviously go into a very deep, dark place about it, but nothing surprises me. Nothing. So enjoy life, you know, and let's keep doing what we need to do. But, you know, when we talk about what we need to do, you know, they say it's irreversible. Volcanic activity, which is increased by 5 times, that could cool the Earth down and give us a bit of breathing space. So, you know, there's nothing certain in this mix. You know, there's so many different variables at play. So we've got to keep fighting and do everything we can. But like, it's very grim.
Just got to change the course of the way we deal with ourselves. No, we can do it. We can change the whole direction of the world.
But it's so foundational, Ollie.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah,
I don't know if you watched the show yesterday, but like, you know,
Not yet.
Yeah.
I haven't had a
Well-
chance. I've been working my butt
Yeah.
off. I've been exhausted. I just had to have a sleep yesterday. Oh no, I went to work yesterday. What am I talking about?
Ollie,
And this morning I had to have a sleep.
Ollie's going to be on the show this coming Friday, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. But if you watch it towards the end, when we're talking about it, and you know, Richard's talking about, you know, life for a 90-year-old. I'm like, this isn't about people hitting 90 years old, guys. You know, this isn't about retirement. This isn't you know, but they're not ready to go there yet. You know, and most people aren't. They're not ready to go there. And
Coffin dodgers.
but if we really start to think about what it means, right? And most people don't want to go there. They just don't want to go there. You know, like I've said it before. My husband still talks about a future I know doesn't exist. I'm like,
Yep.
okay, all right, Dales, and I've got to, you know, and I mean, I can't be a miserable cow all the time, right? So I have to go, yeah, you know.
I think tricking them, Andrea. I think tricking them into glossy future might help. My thing I was banging on about earlier in the day about like Westfield style, places that people can hang out in, and massive underground aquariums for all the corals and the fish that would have been dead otherwise if they've been out in the wild, so on and so forth. Just give people a bit of a glitzy future, which is also part of the kind of protection for the species and for the environment, for nature, if you like, that is completely artificial, but give them that glitzy future, and there's a chance that they might start to see, they're babies, they're children, they're just, they're toddlers, they're tottering along, going, no, everything's fine. It's like, no, it's not fine. You can either give them a real shock wake up, or give them, which is give them what they've been given now, which is Westfields and places like that.
That's an Australian brand too. Yeah,
How
great,
does it?
a great shame.
Has anybody
Yeah,
heard
yeah.
if any government leaders have come out, any environmental leaders, and said anything about this?
I don't think so, Kim. I think that'll be asking
With
too
the
much
with
at this
with
stage. I mean.
with the coral reefs, you mean, Kim?
Yes, with the coral
Right.
reefs.
So an interesting story around the coral reefs. Obviously, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, right? So it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and for years, the Australian government has been fighting UNESCO to keep it listed on its listing. Good English. But basically, UNESCO is saying, it's had like 6 bleachings in the last like 8 years or something like that. So it's pretty much fucked, right? And the Australian government has been fighting to keep it on this list, even though it's on the way out. And, I mean, if you've ever been to the Great Barrier Reef, it is so enormous. I mean, you can see it from space, right? It's enormous, and it goes like the entire length of Queensland, which is, I don't know what an equivalent nation size just that is. But it's just a reef on the verge of collapse. It's but then then just this week I was reading that the greatest migration, the greatest number of which whales, one of the whales, humpback whales, that has been seen since the culling. When it got to the point before they were culling whales. The number of whales that have migrated along the coastline of Australia has been the greatest ever seen since the industrial times when they were killing whales. So then you get these amazing stories, right? And you're like, oh, but then they're going to get down to Antarctica and there's going to be no krill left because we're taking it out at such a rapid pace. And then you hear about the phytoplankton and the zooplankton, and they're sort of turning the oceans green, and their poo isn't sort of doing what it's supposed to do, which is go down to the bottom of the ocean, which draws down the CO2, and it's pretty. Yeah, fires. The fires, including the fires in LA, it's the equivalent of 200 countries' CO2 emissions. And I actually look at the acceleration of fires as another tipping point, because in Canada, when you have the fires in the northern hemisphere, they drop brown carbon onto the Arctic, which makes it less reflective, which increases the melting. Right, so we're definitely in that sort of stage of acceleration. So I hope everyone here, I think it's important that we have hope, obviously, and you guys know I'll always be fighting till the bitter end. But I just want to really encourage everyone. We haven't got to hear that last week one of the ladies in the UK who has an autistic child was talking about her struggles, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it this week. Like, we're never going to go back to what we had. Like that the past is gone. We're building a new future, and we need to start thinking about, well, what does that future look like, right? And wherever we are in the world, that determines what that looks like. And the idea of safe places to go, New Zealand, Canada. I don't know if we can say that that's the case anymore. Looking at some of the things that are happening, so we've got to sort of think about where we are, and we've got to get very community focused. And this is a community; it's a global community, but we also need to get very locally and community focused, and look at how can we help each other? How can we survive together? And, people living by themselves, struggling to survive in a system that is not going to be able to support them in the long term because governments are running out of money, like fighting for something that no longer exists isn't the way to approach it. It's about saying, well, what's the new way to approach it? And so collective living, intergenerational living, community living, putting, gardens, growing food together, making sure your water supplies, community energy, all that sort of stuff. And I think community has to be at the heart of the solutions, because wherever we are, when it comes down to it, that's the only thing that's going to matter is the people that we've got around us. I've got to get my boys through national service. My youngest has got to finish school, and then he's going to do national service. And then my husband and I are sort of going to go, right, so what do we do? Where do we go? And I used to think I would probably, because we have the choice between Australia, Singapore, New Zealand, England, and I used to think, well, choose the safest path that I can see by my understanding. But I'm actually now at the point of choose a place where I can go and hang out with really good mates and have a really good time and just enjoy life. Because I think that's the right approach for me right now. So I'm not being a doomer, you know that, right? But I'm very realistic.
But you know that it's a privileged view.
Yeah. Oh, I totally know that, Jen. Totally.
Okay, because may I get quick in here? Because I think it's. I also know the Rahmstorff, for example. He's also from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research, and they are also publishing, or Rahmstorff also published something here on Twitter in English as well. I put some up in the nest up over the space, and because I think it might even happen earlier. I told it before that because the German Meteorologist Society and the German Physical Society, they just published a paper with there are also international scientists working on it as well, who said that we might reach a 3-degree more than pre-industrial time in by 2050. And I was reading a book about 3-degree more, and in this book it was from 2021, and they are expecting it to be at the end of the century. So most predictions are that say that most of the tipping points will tip in between 1 and 3 degree. So we are likely to hit them all, and this might even change how we in Western in Europe or also in Northern America will live, because it will lead to the time frame for crops will be shorter. We have harder winters, so colder winters might get colder winters and even hotter summers, more weather extremes, and this also influenced, even the areas where we all upstairs here live. Maybe not Andrea, I'm not sure. It's mostly on Europe and focused on Northern America, but that also means that in some places, even I wrote it a few days ago also to Oliver and with Kim and Alex, that it also there are areas where no one will be able to live anymore. That also means some place in Africa and in
Where I am.
Asia where
Yeah,
you
where I am.
are might
Yeah.
be as well, yes. And even in places like Greece or Spain or southern France, Portugal, these are also areas that might be no places, and these are places where we get our food in Europe at the moment. Also the Britons, I think, get their fruits from there. So this is really this will change how we see and how it will affect us, and I hope this will push us even further to do start the one social tipping point, which is solar. We really need to stop burning stuff, and I think you're absolutely right. We're saying that we need to get get in our communities, get to know the more people around us, show them what they have to have on stuff if the if the food chain breaks, and our crops fails, because we need to have something in storage, but we also need to learn some new skills that we might forgotten. We need to look for our water systems to keep them safe as well. It's a really big security issue, and but there are places around the world where these things won't be enough, because that's why on the COP they are talking about loss and damage funds, and there are places that might be not livable, where people can't live anymore, and this you can't pay that. How will you say how much is how much is a life worth? It's something really cool to discuss already, and a lot of insurance companies might even break, and this also might affect the financial system. And I think also in the book where Ramsdorff is writing 3 Degree More, he also tells that he also counts how many damage and what it costs to rebuild it already. And for example, it's not in the book, but I just heard it a few days ago, that the mayor of New York, he counts that it's like $500 each year what it will cost not to do something for the climate. It's just the damage that the heating of the globe will affect in the city. And this is and I'm not sure how many people are living in New York at the moment, just like this, but you might look it up, how much money would be free to spend for more climate security, and even for climate justice, because some people will be more affected than we are, and we have to pay it because we profited. We built our industry on the loss of others, and this is disgusting, kind of a despicable. How, I'm not sure what's the right word, but this is so we need to get in our communities and rebuild our communities, and maybe demand that they change to stop using fossil fuels, go on renewable energies and battery storage. But we still have to demand from our politicians, and also from our people around us, that they demand it from our politicians in the global north, that they need to change it. I know that in US we might you don't have a chance at the moment, and you might need to wait until the tipping point for Trump is reached. But um, we still, because I think it's also the financial profit from investing in renewable energies might even help to grow the wealth in these countries as well, because at the moment it's not working anymore. It's a decline as well in the wealth, and this also needs to change. And the insurance companies, they are telling they can't pay money anymore. It might even crack like it cracked in 2008 when the financial bubble blazed, and it might even be worse than that. So there's a lot of money to pay for it. That's what that was my point.
4,250,000,000 in New York. 4,250,000,000. That's the cost. If it's $500 uptake per year, there's 8.5 million people there.
And that's only New York in 1 year.
That's just New York.
So there's enough money there.
But I want.
Well, that's 4 billion. That's 4 billion.
I want to talk about the timeline that you're talking about here, right? Because one of the things that frustrates me is everyone thinks we've got longer. So we're going to hit 2 degrees by the end of this decade, according to the scientists. So 2 degrees is the death of the corals, 100%, right? So we're already going to be dealing with that. So I live 70 kilometers north of the equator. Indonesia, in the south of Indonesia, between now and the end of the year, they're sort of in the high 30s with their temperature, which is astronomical from a regional perspective. It's usually this region's usually in the 28 to 34 degrees sort of year round, right? So they're in the 30 sort of 8 plus degrees, and that's just the actual temperature, not the wet bulb temperature. So in the UK, in the last since 2020, they've lost a year's worth of bread from wheat losses from weather, just from 2020 to 2024, right? So this food risk. So we have 3 months reserves of food. In most nations of the planet have 3 months reserves. Rice is one of the 60% of the world's population relies on rice, right? So it's all predominantly grown in this part of the world, and once you get past 35 degrees, your rice crops fail. So the speed of food insecurity as an issue, as a cost, food inflation, but also as an issue, is going to probably, Jeff Goodall wrote the book "The Heat Will Kill You First." I'm starting to think that food security is going to kill us first. Not all of us, we're privileged, but a lot of people are going to start to die. And that's another thing I think is really important to get our heads around, is that there is going to be a lot of loss of life. And we're big-hearted people. We care about people. I really care about the poorest people because they've been my neighbours for 20 years, right? I really care about the people that I know who are going to be most impacted, So in India at the moment, outside the American embassy, even the richest people can't get an appointment. So the doors to migration are starting to close. We've got rising nationalism right across the Northern Hemisphere and in countries like Australia. So the racism and all that sort of stuff. And so all of this stuff is all mixed together, right? We need migration because the birth rate's dropping. So we need and the birth rate's dropping not just because women are choosing not to have children. It's also because of all the endocrine disruptors that are in the environment, which are microplastics and chemicals and all that sort of stuff, right? And one of the things that I kind of struggle with, and my headphones are about to die, is none of the politicians are having honest conversations about this. Politicians are acting on this. They're especially in Asia, they're doing what they can, but they don't talk about it because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to be first.
Yeah, you're right, Andrea. Your headphones just went. And I can add in here that there's a great thing about you can organise clubs and stuff like that, and local clubs to learn and be preparedness for what's coming. But the great fear, the great thing that isn't being mentioned much here either, is if you like, violence, local violence. People, the one set of people being peaceful and trying to do the right thing, but quite another set of people who, at the drop of a hat, will pick up a gun or a knife or a club or whatever and will turn on us. There is that aspect too that has to be looked at,
100%.
which is coming.
100%. Living in Phuket during the pandemic, violence started to rise, and it rose not because people wanted to hurt other people, but because they were hungry. Hungry people do things, they do things. They and so, I'm in the Singapore bubble. This government will do everything it can to take care of its people for as long as it can, and it will do everything it can to survive this, and it will also make deals with governments around the world to move its people to other nations, because that's Singapore, right? They think ahead, they plan ahead. But yeah, we've got to we've got to really face this time, and we can't dance around the edges. and the whole conversation is always dancing around the edges for me. And it's not a doomerist way of looking at it. It's like, come on, let's get realistic about this. We got to do everything we can, absolutely everything we can, and we might fail, but at least we try.
Yeah, exactly, Andrea. I agree entirely. And what's more, what's to stop local clubs being set up
Yeah.
anyway? Evening clubs, evening classes. Learn how to cook, learn how to grow vegetables, learn how to chop wood, learn how to chop
Exactly.
stone, damn it, if you must, you know. And at the same time, this kind of tuition, if you like, this kind of learning, I don't know how much is being done in schools these days, because I'm not a parent. I don't get much input into schools, but I don't think very
No.
much, frankly. And kids, once you can make it a subject imaginative and interesting, kids will jump at it no matter what it is. But if it's you know, growing leeks
Mhm.
or something, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's made interesting, they will go for it. They will, you know, leave your smartphones at the door and blah blah, and do some proper old-fashioned learning, gardening and carpentry. Yeah, why
And
not? Damn
sewing.
it, learn it. You might be surprised.
Yeah.
Sewing, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh no, not sewing.
No.
I
Yes,
am-
we need sewing.
Sewing is
No,
fun.
no, I did. I hated that class. I had to take sewing. I had to take home economics, but actually, I am glad that I know how to sew. You know, Andrea, thanks for all your insights, and Oliver as well. I'm just going to play a little bit of devil's advocate or be a bit of a contrarian because I was thinking, you know, we can talk about preparing and you know what we're going to do when the crops fail, but I think that's all premised on this idea that, you know, the crops will fail and then after a short period of time, things will get better again. But if things collapse, this is probably very long term. So, you know, it's preparedness for, you know, not being able to survive anymore. Like, I guess my point is we've got to make changes before this full blown climate emergency happens because by then it's already too late. We won't be able to turn things around ecologically, so to speak, right? I mean, we've got to that's the one thing about, you know, having this warm water coral tipping point happen, because it seems, in quotation marks, like the most benign of all the tipping points. But it should be what, you know, the world is saying right now. We need to start making some choices. We need to be on emergency footing. We need to mandate decarbonization. We need everyone to up their what is it, the national plans for climate change for the Paris Protocol. We need COP30 to be about the people, and especially the people of the small island nations who are going to very soon be bearing the brunt. And, you know, I hope countries such as mine and other countries will be willing to have people come in mass numbers to be sheltered from it. But inevitably, I think there's going to be people left behind, and it's going to be heartbreaking.
Do you really think the coral reefs dying is benign?
No, I don't. Jennifer was mentioning it earlier that that's how it was being categorized, but no, I don't think it's benign. What I'm saying is that in the grand scheme of all the different tipping points and in terms of a cascade, that right now, at least that's the science is saying that this is kind of, I guess, has the most minimal cascading effect is what I'm saying.
Really? Is that what you're hearing?
No,
Yes.
I hear it's, I think it's just the start, and it's like a warning that it might still affect the other ones. I just put up also like from the Potsdam Institute of Climate Research that the four key parts of the Earth's climate system are destabilizing. Researchers analyze the interconnection of the Greenland ice sheet, AMAC, the Amazon rainforest, and the South American monsoon system, and the warming of the ocean surface is part of it. And so it's like a warning signal that the others might come next. This is how I would see it.
So this is what I find amazing about this news, right? 25% of life in the ocean depends on the coral reefs. 25% of the life in the ocean depends on the coral reefs, and that's just direct need, right? But the other 75% of the ocean also depends on the coral reef. So it's like the cornerstone of the ocean. So to me, it is the biggest issue that we face right now. It's not like it's like if the Antarctic ice sheet goes and it's going to raise sea levels by whatever. It, if AMOC goes, it's going to have all these different effects. If Greenland ice sheet goes, it's going to have the biggest impact, as far as my understanding of all of them. The biggest and most dangerous thing is the die off of the coral reefs, and that's the first.
I think, Andrea, it is the four big ones are the AMOC, the Amazon rainforest, the Antarctic ice, and the Greenland glaciers. I think the being overwhelmed. That's what I've heard. They're being over. I understand what you're saying. 25% of the ocean's biodiversity is in coral reefs.
No. It's not 25% of the biodiversity is in coral reefs. It's 25% of the ocean's life depends on coral reefs. But that's just the bit that depends on coral reefs.
Right, but the 25% is by biodiversity. The biodiversity of ocean life.
But it damaged the food system as well from everything that lives in the ocean. So it's it's a breeding point.
I'm trying to say a few things here. One is I want to end the space, so I can go take a walk. And I think another thing is we know these things. These are the factors we live with every single day. These are not new surprises. And that sense of the 8 billion people procrastinating, the governments, the corporations, the people, nobody is taking care of these problems and these issues. I think we all know that. And it is in constantly re-evaluating and trying again and finding new efforts and new ways of moving forward together. I don't think it's hopeless yet, and I don't think we're guaranteed success either. It's somewhere in the middle. I understand about the coral reefs. There's literally one disaster after another out there, and the really important thing is not to get overwhelmed. So much of the nature of this club itself, it is that sort of, the space on Saturday and a post here or there in the chat and saying hello to someone on the Twitter somewhere. It is in that regularity and the continuity. I feel for you, Andrea. I know that Robert and Dale and Kim and Jennifer and Oliver are feeling exactly like you are. None of us, me too. We're all feeling what you're feeling, but we have this hope that together we might get somewhere. It's not easy, but it's our life. It is our passion and our life and what we do every day from waking up to going to bed. And it is so important to connect with nature, what I want to do right now. But yeah, Polly.
Oh, it's Kim.
I just suspect that what Andrea is saying is the coral reefs, the benign aspect of them is the fact that the coral reefs have been dying off for quite some time. I would put myself in this bracket as well. Actually, I would think, oh yeah, that comes as no surprise to me, But I do know the severity of what the coral reefs are doing to the ocean life generally, and at the same time, the public will just see the coral reefs as pretty things being killed off. They won't see it as anything more than that because they don't have the education for it. They're not involved in it like we are in 1% of the capacity that we have in the club. So they therefore see it as something very benign.
Yeah, we've kicked that soccer ball around in circles, round and round and round. And the solution is to keep going with the scientists, keep cooking, keep reading, keep sleeping well. You do have to forgive me from my artist, Alcoholics Anonymous perspective, that I have to take care of myself and keep living my life in a kind of organized fashion. And I don't see any reason why all of you can't do that too. And then in kind of in a militaristic fashion, we get to where we need to be. These governments and these corporations are not completely insane. They're not completely intoxicated. They're really quite sober when it comes to money and to prestige in some of these factors. And, we know in due time they will wake up. But in the meantime, we keep talking to the friends and the if I'm around anyone physically, I try as best I can to not talk about climate and environment. And inevitably, I just start blabbing on, whether it's coral reefs and this tipping story, whether it's manatees, you name it, the whole world of nature out there that we discuss every day. We're with you, Andrea. We're with you. And we're looking for more people. And I've been talking to the American communists all week. One of them I saw in here for sure listening. They have a website and they seem friendly. So I do want to end the space. I do want to thank you all. It was kind of fun to hear from David after a long time. Thank you so much, Robert and Kim. And I think a good night's sleep and a fresh day tomorrow. Whatever your mom would have told you back in the day, my mom was always about getting a good dinner and having a bath and going to bed. So thank you so much, guys.